Dude, I'm the British women's deadlift record holder. Still, if you Google UK women's deadlift record, my name still pops right up. I hate the concept of white privilege. Why? Because it's racist. It's not real. I've had people trying to convince me I'm oppressed. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Andrew Tate. It's not very clear to me as to like why he got taken off all these
No,
platforms.
I spoke to him the day that it happened. Do you know the policy that they banned him under?
No.
Was the dangerous individuals or organizations.
So that motherfucker was spitting too much truth.
When you encourage this censorship or safe spaces or whatever, and you're discouraging conversation and debate, then it furthers the problem. We keep looking for political realm solutions to spiritual realm problems and being surprised when it doesn't work.
All right, guys, bang, bang. Zuby's here. I think this is your third or fourth time on the show in person, and I thought a fantastic place to start would be the importance of not being a coward on the internet today. It feels like there's tons of people who publicly don't say shit. Mm-hmm. And then I go to dinner with them, I talk to them in private, and they'll just go off. And I'm like, yo, you're like a little bitch online, and you're super based or like at least willing to like say what you actually believe in private. Like, why is that happening?
Ooh, man, that's a big question. And I think last time I was here, I talked about the pandemic of cowardice that I felt was going on in society and happening across the world. And it's something that I understand. It's not a new thing. It's not a new thing. I think one of the most common human desires is to fit in with people. And another is to avoid criticism and backlash and avoid rocking the boat. I think there's a lot of reasons why we have those tendencies, and it makes sense, right? Most of us don't want to go around every day and deal with more conflict than we have to, both online and offline. So, you know, there's no one, and it wouldn't be sensible to be constantly saying absolutely everything that's on your mind at all times or getting in every single conflict or argument that you have to and so on. So I understand that to a degree. I think the problem is when it does become actual cowardice, right? Not just like a basic level of decorum or sensibility, but when people are genuinely afraid to say something that needs to be said or do something that needs to be done. And I think especially over the past few years that we've just lived through, it became so clear, number one, how pervasive that cowardice is and how unwilling people are to speak out even when it's very, very necessary. I mean, you've really seen this play out a lot over the past decade, to be honest with you. But I think most of it is self-preservation and wanting to maintain social status and social currency and to, you know, of course, there's people often use their jobs and their families and say, oh, well, you know, the truth is we all have stuff to lose. Mm-hmm. People have this idea that, oh, there's these people who can speak out and these people who can't because these people are in some amazing. It's like, no, there's people who are broke with jobs who will speak out. And there are people who are billionaires and who are self-employed and have true FU money and whatever, but they're absolute cowards. In fact, this goes for the majority of celebrities. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a character thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's really a character thing. And it's one of those things that day to day, it's not always a problem, but everything we do is habitual. So both cowardice and courage are both habitual and contagious. So that's why I use that term pandemic of cowardice, right? Because when everyone else is behaving in a certain way, the fewer people who are speaking out, the harder it is to speak out. And one of the things that frustrates me about it is, number one, it's why certain things keep getting worse because people are not taking any type of stand and continually refuse to for years on end. But also it increases the burden on those of us who are willing to say something, right? People want to hide behind the sofa and cheer on. You know, imagine, I don't know, you're with a group of friends and I don't know, somebody jumps you and your friends all jump and hide behind a sofa and they're like, yeah, go get him, Pomp, go get him. It's like, bro, like you're hiding behind the sofa. Like you coming, don't put it now I'm, you know, there's 5 of us and 5 of them. Now it's 5 on me. And
when the fight's over, then you have a friend who's like, yeah, I'm glad they left. Hold me back.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it can get frustrating. So to me, one of the things I hear most often, I mean, I travel a lot. I've been to probably, I mean, most people were not traveling much over the last few years. I went to 8 different countries, dozens of different cities. And when I get recognized in public, or if I do meetups, or, you know, the thing most people say is, well, firstly, thanks, people who recognize me. But I'm often thanked for my courage. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting to me. Because on one hand, it is a compliment, and I'm like, thanks. On another hand, it kind of annoys me because it makes me realize, like, why is the bar for courage so low? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't consider myself, maybe I'm a more courageous person than average, but I don't consider myself like ultra brave. I mean, there's people who are in the military, there's firefighters, there's police officers risking their lives dealing with really dangerous criminals and so on. I'm like, man, I wouldn't want to be in the military, right? Like, I'm just talking. I'm saying things. I'm talking on podcasts. I'm talking in my music. I'm talking on Twitter. That, to me, I mean, if people don't feel free to talk here in the USA, in the UK, and Canada, and Australia, or places where you're supposed to have actual freedom of speech, both in a legal sense and also in a cultural sense, then what hope do we have for the rest of the world? And another part of the problem with it is you can't fix anything unless you can talk. Mm-hmm. This is one of the biggest issues I have with political correctness. And when I talk about political correctness, I'm not talking about basic politeness and civility. I'm talking about political correctness in the true sense that there's things you can't talk about. You can't say that. It's like, what? How can there be a fact or a piece of data or a statistic or something that's just real, or even if it's an opinion that you just can't say? Because if you're not allowed to discuss a topic, you can't fix it. And that's one of the biggest problems that is going on and is plaguing the West, as far as I'm concerned. There are certain issues that are happening on different levels: societal issues, crime issues, cultural issues, political issues, and you're not even allowed to talk about them. Well, I mean, you are. Like, I'm not saying you're not allowed to, but people feel like you're not allowed to.
There's social pressure. It's like legally you're allowed to talk about it, and if you talk about it, no one is going to come knock on your door and say you are under arrest.
Yes.
But you will lose friends, you will be shunned from certain groups, and you will feel the social pressure of, why are you talking about that? Why are you questioning this thing? But do you think that there's been a shift from, I don't know, maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's hindsight bias, maybe it's just we're young, dumb kids, but growing up, it felt like when you were told something by a position of power, expertise, influence, government, whatever you want to put in that category, the default was you believed it until you found something to make you question it.
Yeah.
Now it feels like the default when we're told something, maybe it's the internet, maybe it's whatever, the default is I do not believe that and I question it, and I only believe it once I learn the information that confirms that it's true.
Uh-huh.
Do you feel that shift from like the default position being acceptance to now maybe questioning? That doesn't mean you don't believe it as much as it's just like the default is now critical thinking or critical questioning of what you're being told.
Have we lived through the same past 3 years?
I don't know. Have we?
It's not the default.
You don't think so?
No, the default is complete acceptance of the narrative. Clearly.
See, I don't know if I agree with that.
How can you disagree after what we've just lived through?
Because if you look at the virus as one thing, I agree.
Okay.
If you look at the economic story, I don't think the majority of people in America believe that inflation is low, not a problem, transitory, whatever.
Well, at this point, it's hitting them in the face.
Yes.
So it's hard for people to deny it now. A year ago, even though it was obviously coming. A year ago, I think majority of people would have bought that line. Now you can't say it and have any credibility because people are there and they're in their store, or
they go to the grocery store,
or they're at the gas pump, and they're like, "Whoa, this is like
that shit says $5. It never said that before."
Yeah, exactly right. So, and this is the sad reality, is that humans always have to learn the hard way. Right? Not every single person, but in general, people like learning the hard way. They want to put their hand in the fire and get burned. You can tell them, yo, don't touch the fire. The fire is hot. And this goes across a lot of different subjects, but oftentimes the lesson will not be learned until it until it happens, then it affects that individual directly. This is something I've talked about for many years. And one reason why I publicly started speaking out more about a lot of stuff was just that I could see where I have good foresight. I have good foresight. I practice second, third, fourth order thinking. And it's like, okay, well, this thing's going to lead to this thing and this thing's going to lead to this thing. And if there's no resistance, one crazy thing that can happen in a population is a very tiny minority of people who are dedicated can completely shift and control society and culture, right? And I'm not even just talking about the people who are referred to as the elites or whatever. I'm talking about fringe activist groups. I'm talking about.
Have you ever heard of the ESG movement?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But even on a lower scale, right? There are some really kooky ideas that have been floating around at this point for years, which almost nobody believes in. Mm-hmm. But people are afraid to say that they don't. People will still go along with the narrative or at.
Is there an example of something that like sticks out in your mind?
Dude, I'm the British women's deadlift record holder. Still.
Say that again for people so they get
right?
it.
I said I'm the British women's deadlift record holder. Bro, that was
no woman's beat you.
How can they? They need to have some advantage. They need to have something most women don't.
So you still are the record holder.
I think if you Google UK women's deadlift record, someone can verify this for me, but I think my name still pops right up. But my point is, I did that in February 2019. This is 3.5 years ago now. This is still a conversation. This is still a quote unquote debate and so on. Bro, no one believes this. Nobody. How many people? If you go outside, you go in around the USA even, and you ask people, are biological males and females different? Do you think it is fair for males to compete against females in profession? No one believes it. No one believes that men can get pregnant. No one believes that women have penises. But we're living in this weird world where people would even be afraid to say what I just said. Oh my gosh, he just said that women don't have penises. It's like, bro, like. We know this. That's not a controversial statement. Why am I even saying this? Like, we're in this weird battle for reality. That's one of the most concerning things about this all is that it's not that, okay, we're agreeing on objective reality and people have different opinions on how to interpret it or what should be done with it or so on. It's people are no longer even agreeing on objective reality. We saw this again all through the pandemic situation. And it was like, well, if we can't even like agree just on the reality and numbers and data, just what we can all observe, then we're in massive trouble, right?
So this goes back to like, I think the default was always, at least the perception was like science and math were not political. Now, it's not completely true in maybe the science standpoint, because for decades, centuries, whatever, there would be certain scientific breakthroughs. People wouldn't believe it. The earth is round. People would get killed for saying that, whatever, right? So it's not exactly black and white, but I do think that most people for a very long time thought that it wasn't like Fox News and MSNBC were going to argue over gravity.
Yes.
Right? Like there were certain things that were just not political. Where my mind started to change on this, and I was like, oh shit, we're going to a place we don't want to go, was I read an article, this is maybe 2 to 4 years ago. So, I forget exactly when. And it talked about the massive investment that was being made by MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN in weather.
Interesting.
And I was like, why are they all going so hard at weather? And obviously the Weather Channel in the United States had been super successful and there was a business there. And then towards the end of the article, I started talking about climate change. It's a political issue.
Yes.
I was like, wait a minute, ain't that a science issue?
No.
Like, what's going on? And then that's when it dawned on me. I said, oh my God, the media companies are going to compete over science because whoever gets to say we have the science gets the political upper hand in all of their other coverage. Yeah.
Dude, it's a problem. And the politicization of everything is a huge problem. I mean, I did a thread on this just the other day on Twitter, and I was just saying this obsession with politicizing and racializing everything, especially in the USA, it's a big problem. It happens in other places, but not like this. Like I'm from the UK, and it's not any issue. I mean, I don't know when this interview comes out, but as we, just yesterday, there's another shooting that happened in a city. And I'm there, and everyone's talking about race and Democrats and Republicans. And I'm like, guys, what the heck, man? Like every time there's a mass shooting, there's a tragedy, there's something awful that happens. Some people's minds immediately jumps to, okay, what race was the perpetrator? What race was were the victims? What were their leanings? Were they right leaning? Were they a white nationalist, or was it a white guy? Was it a black? And I'm like, dude, like the bodies are warm. Like, how are you immediately, some tragedy happens, your immediate thought is like, okay, how can I use this to fit my political agenda, or how can I use this to demonize the group that I feel some kind of animosity towards or whatever? And I'm like, dude, that's sick. Like that's really messed up. There's a time and place for certain conversations, but it's just like, man, like, and I think even with these situations, this is another problem, is that it's all talked about on such a shallow level. It's all talked about on such a shallow level. You know, it's like, okay, you're allowed to talk about guns. Of course, you can talk about guns, right? You can push, it's guns. You know, when can we have the talk about the spiritual war that's going on? When can we have a conversation about morality? When can we have a conversation about family and fathers and community and morality? Right? When can we even talk about, you can sort of talk about mental health and pharmaceuticals, that's allowed. But, as soon as you go into kind of any spiritual or moral realm, anything that's a little bit deeper, it's like, oh, no, we can't even talk about that. And it's like, well, you're going to keep getting this problem until you're allowed to talk about it. Right? If the thing is just, we need to ban AR-15s and we need to reduce the magazine. I'm like, bro, like in the UK, it's stabbings. And in the UK, they do the same thing, by the way. They're like, maybe ban knives? We need to reduce the length of knives. I'm like, dude, if someone wants to hurt or kill somebody, we all have access to lethal weapons. Every single person. We all own knives. We all pretty much own vehicles. We have bats, we have clubs, we have fists, we have feet, right? If you want, and by the way, I think it's important for people to know that even in the US, way more people are killed by those weapons than they are by rifles, right? More people are stabbed to death, more people are beaten to death, right? And way more people are obviously killed by handguns and so on. But it's just this obsession of, we've got this political thing about this particular tool. And it's so shallow and so superficial and so annoying. And ultimately, the reason it pisses me off is because people are just going to keep on getting hurt and keep on dying until some real conversations are had. Yeah. Right.
I think a lot about the media coverage of this stuff as well. Yes. So you're talking about like the internet conversation, right? To the degree of a shooting happens and immediately gets polarized.
Media does the same thing.
But they also in some way are by not covering certain things, they are telling us a lot about society. And so, I don't know, maybe the last couple of weeks or whatever, I saw that there's a Twitter account, and every Monday or Sunday night, they will tweet out how many people were shot and killed in Chicago.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And the numbers are like staggering.
It's insane.
Right? It'll be like, 35 people were killed over the weekend. And you're like, yo, what? Like, I didn't hear about that anywhere else. And then you're like, okay, go in the comments, take away their guns, do this. And then people are like, dude, the guns are illegal. But like, you can't have the gun, right? And the criminals still somehow figure out how to get it. And it goes back to this idea of like, wait a minute, like what if our entire like framework for evaluating the problem is wrong?
It is wrong.
And okay, so explain.
It's completely wrong. As I said, look, it's a problem of the human heart and the human spirit, right? I think sometimes it's important to not just consider why people do things, but to consider why they don't, okay? So as we've established, we both have access and the physical capability to kill, right? We have access to weapons and we have the capability to kill, right? Why don't we kill people? No, honestly, right? Why?
Well, one, we want to be a good person.
Yes.
Right. Two is there's this almost social contract with the people in your community of let's all get along to some degree. Three is you'll go to jail, right? So there's like a punishment component to it.
I'd say that's pretty low down.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the
I
way.
think the moral aspects and ethical aspects are much, much higher than the threat of.
Without a doubt. I mean, I remember when Egypt went through the uprising, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or whatever it was. And everyone was like, it was Twitter, right? And yes, social media, without a doubt, I think everyone who looked at that situation and learned about it would say social media played a role. But you know what played a bigger role? They didn't have food.
Yes.
Guess what? Everyone thinks that they're a super moral, ethical person until literally they're looking at their wife and their kids and they're like, I don't go and kill our neighbor, my kids won't eat and they will die of starvation.
It's horrible.
It just becomes the most brutal form of human nature. And obviously those are very extreme cases. They happen very, very infrequently globally, thankfully. But you can take the watered down version and bring it back to there's a morality aspect.
There's a huge morality aspect. Okay, let's take one specific issue, which is a hot topic, not just in the U.S. but globally: school shootings. Okay, when did that become a more regular thing? Right, it's only in the past couple decades.
For sure,
the guns have been there. Kids used to wear in the 60s, the 70s. Kids were taking rifles to school. Kids had guns in their lockers, and so on. School shootings were very, very rare, right? It was around the Columbine time where it started to become this.
So early 2000s probably.
Yeah, I want to say
like
late 90s or early 2000s and so on. So how can you say it's just the guns when the guns have always been there? If the guns have always been there and the problem just really started, say, 25 years ago, right? How can, guns were not introduced as a new thing. So yes, of course.
There's more guns on the school campuses 25 plus years ago.
Yes, this is my point, right? Or even if you look within cities, like where are shootings happening? Ooh, it's happening in places with the heaviest gun control laws and so on and so forth. It's not just as simple as more guns equals more shooting. Right? It's really not that simple. Even if you look at a country like Europe, I think Switzerland is the most heavily armed country in Europe, I believe, followed by Finland. Right. Wow. And you're not getting a lot of shootings in, there's probably more I believe there's going to be more shootings in the UK than there are in Switzerland, even per capita and so on. So it's not that simple. The problem is people wanting to hurt and kill other people. If an individual decides they want to hurt or kill another person or a group of people, they will use whatever tools are at their disposal. Yes, sure, it might be easier to kill people with a gun, but there's bombs, there's knives, there's vehicles, right? Some of the most brutal killings that have happened in Europe were just someone taking a van or a truck and just running it through a crowd.
This is what happened in New York City.
Right.
I think it's happened at least 2 stories that I know.
Yeah.
And in one case, they rented like a U-Haul truck and just drove down the bike path.
So the thing is, okay, so the questions to me is like, why, what possesses someone to do that? And as I said, the flip side, okay, most people, 99.9% of people wouldn't even dream of doing that, wouldn't do it. So what are they getting right and what's going wrong here? And if you look at the individuals who do this, there's always a pattern. First, it's always young men. It's not women doing it. It's not girls. It's always young men, typically between, say, 15 and 30. Okay, what else do they have in common? Majority of time, there's no father in the picture. Okay, that's a factor. Oftentimes, they're on some type of psychoactive substance or drug. Right? Oftentimes they're known to the authorities already, right? There's a certain profile where you could narrow this down and be like, okay, what's going on here, right? So there's some type of depravity here. There's some type of moral loss, the way this child has been raised, something that's going on in their brain. Like there's stuff that's going on there. And I don't have all the answers. My thing is just, this conversation we're having, this should be the conversation. As soon as people are just there, I'm talking about magazine sizes and AR-15s, I'm just like, dude, you don't think that person could have done that with a handgun or with a shotgun? Or like, it's just so, I know people have their political pet causes and they have their, people like this idea. Here's another big one. And I've tweeted this before and it went viral. I said, we keep looking for political realm solutions to spiritual realm problems and being surprised when it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it's a great way.
Not everything can be solved with politics. And people don't like to hear that because in this rather increasingly secular society that we're living in, people increasingly view the government as the be-all and end-all and view everything through this political lens.
I also think there's an element where when it's politics, I have a weapon to tell you what to do.
Yes.
When it's spiritual, I only have a weapon to try to improve my situation. That there's no way for me really to use a spiritual tool to impact you, control you, or anything, right? Yeah. Yes, you can try to get you to go to church or whatever, but it's not as direct of a control mechanism as let's change the rules, let's use the police, let's do whatever. I'm reading this book. It's called Cults. Okay. I was in the bookstore and I saw it, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" Right? Open it up. It's 10 people. And as you can imagine, cults have a very negative connotation, and usually because they end in some horrific way.
Yes.
And the first 50 pages of this book, Charles Manson, and the whole story. Now, Charles Manson, I think a lot of people would say, I heard the name before, especially young people. I know bad person, there's some murders, but I don't really know the story. In this book, the first 20, 25 pages is all about his childhood.
Okay.
It's exactly what you're talking about. Absolutely horrific, got moved multiple times between all these different homes, in and out of jail, to the point where like 10 years old, like stealing a car and like going across state lines, right? I mean, just like to the point where you're just like, this is really bad compared to on the scale of like a bad 10-year-old, right? And it's just like, if you looked at that child's life, you wouldn't think that they became the president of the United States. Yeah. Now, you might not jump to the conclusion that there was murder and cults and, kind of the other extreme. But it's kind of just like, yeah, of course that person has challenges.
Yes.
And of course that person probably ended up in a place that society was like, man, we wish that people didn't go there.
Yeah.
And so it just made me think a lot about like, that is a situation where like, there's no ability for somebody else to show up without understanding that backstory and be able to help that individual. Like the context is so important. Now, again, that doesn't excuse the behavior. It doesn't do any of this stuff, right? It's still horrific. Yeah. But like, that's a pretty big fucking detail of a story. And as you see some of these people who go and do these horrific things today in society, that's what you're talking about. Like, there's the drugs that they're on. It's broken families. It's known to the authorities. That's the one that always gets me. It's like, you're telling me that the police knew this person had threatened to go kill people a bunch of times, and somehow they still did it.
Or they'd like dismembered a kitten or like done some really effed up thing.
And we don't have the data, right? So we don't know how many times does the authorities get alerted to this person is a person of interest, right? Or however they characterize it. And then what percent of those people actually go and do something super horrific?
Yeah. You also can't arrest people for crimes they have not committed.
Correct.
Right? That's a factor. There's so many factors, and it's complicated. I'm not, and that's part of the problem. I think this is why people want the simple.
Yeah, you're not allowed
solution,
to say that. You can't say it's
complicated. People want the simple solution. It's complicated, and it's also generational, and it's multifaceted, right? I'm not saying that it's just the one thing, right? There can be political elements, social elements, religious or spiritual elements, like overall morality and social fabric elements, and so on. A huge family component as well. How rare is it for someone who is like well raised in a stable, loving family to go on and do anything like this, right? It's extremely, extremely rare. And this is not to say that most people who aren't raised in that environment go on and do that, but it's
It also begs a question which I don't have the answer to.
Okay.
Should the parents be held accountable for certain actions of their kids? So, for example, if your kid is 10 years old, goes to the store, and you're with them, and they steal something.
Yes.
They may yell at the kid or whatever. They don't take the kid to jail, right? At least in the United States. But they yell at the parents too. Like, hey, what's going on here? Whatever. Okay, that's like, I don't know, petty theft, if you even want to characterize that as a 10-year-old taking a candy bar or something. If your kid goes on and does a school shooting, okay, like that's a whole different ball game. And there's a bunch of stuff in between. But right now, there's this complex question of the parents, you don't control the kid, right? Especially the kids over 18 and all these things. But also, how do you create a system that incentivizes good parenting? Right. And so like maybe it's incentives, it's not punishments. Maybe it's punishments and incentives. I don't know what the answer is, but it just feels like a really important question that we have to ask ourselves is like, how do we incentivize better parenting so that maybe we could divert, even if it was 10% of the bad stuff?
Yes.
That'd be a win.
Yeah. And you know, I'm not a parent yet, but it's really hit me over the last few years that I think the importance of parenting is vastly underestimated and underappreciated, both in the positive and the negative.
Okay.
Because if you really think about like how stuff ripples out and resonates out, I mean, it's insane. So the person I am and my 4 siblings is, some of it is just, you know, your genetics and your personality, but a lot of it's like how we were raised. Okay. And by me being raised in a certain way and being put on a certain path and instilled with certain morals, I then have, how many people do I impact on a daily, monthly, annual basis? I reach millions of people, right? And so, and those people then also reach thousands or millions. So the way both the positivity and the negativity ripples out into wider society cannot be understated. If you raise a terror of a child, if you raise a demon child, right, that's not just bad for them and bad for the family. That's bad for society. That's bad for your wider community. That's bad for your country because they go on and they hurt people and they're leaving in their wake this path of destruction, which is now impacting all these other people. And then oftentimes it becomes a generational thing and that's passed on. You know, you can pass down the goodness or you can pass on the nightmare. And yeah, sure, that cycle can be broken in both ways. So I think it's actually understated and underappreciated just how important parents are and families are, because that's really the foundation for an individual's whole life. And then, like I said, that individual impacts others. And I think this is uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable for people to discuss this. Like, this is a conversation that's considered very unpolitically correct, right? Even if you tell people like it's better for a child to have a mother and a father. People are like, oh, right? People immediately want to object to that now. Like, not long ago, in most parts of the world, that's a completely, not even a slightly controversial statement. It's like, duh, obviously, right? And here it's contentious and it's arguing. And, you know, sure, if someone's like, oh, well, you know, I was raised by a single mom and I'm like, bro, like, no one is attacking you. People deem everything as an attack. Everyone personalizes everything, right?
But
so
they
if
also
you say
switch
something,
when you say it's better for the child, it immediately jumps to don't attack single moms or single fathers or whatever. But it's like, no, if the sole optimization is what is the best thing for a child, let's have that conversation. By the way, like you can disagree, you can have other facts, you like whatever. But it's like stay focused on what are we optimizing for in this specific conversation versus try to twist it around.
Exactly. And do you know another thing that's plaguing the West is this obsession with exceptions.
Oh, interesting.
Right? People trying to base everything on exceptions rather than the general rule. Okay? So we're focusing on exceptions to the detriment of the norm and the majority, right? So with any particular issue, someone will want to say, oh, well, you know, what about this or what about that? And it's like, dude, can we talk about like the 90% scenario or the 98% scenario rather than obsessing over these exceptions and basing the rules and the standards and the norms around exceptions rather than around norms in anything? You're going to have exceptions, right? If I say, you know, oh, people have 5 fingers on each hand. Someone's like, oh, well, you know, my auntie has 6 fingers on her. Or, you know, oh, well, what about
so let's make all the gloves with 6 fingers.
Yeah, that's insensitive. You know, I lost my left hand in an accident. I'm like, dude, I'm not. Yes, I recognize there are people who do not have 10 fingers. There's people with more. There's people with fewer. That does not change the general fact that people have 10 fingers, you know? So yes, there are children who can be raised in all sorts of, you know, there's children who can be raised in what looks like an idyllic, perfect environment and they go on and, you know, they're screw ups. And there can be people who are raised in very, very bad situations and so on, and they go on and achieve great things. Yes, we know there are billions of humans. There's so much variety and variation, but objectively, all other things being equal, even by a simple factor of 2 being more than 1, it is better for a child to have 2 parents. We know this. That's not a controversial statement, right? And yes, there can be, and you have to acknowledge exceptions, right? There are people who are widows, right? Someone dies, or this happens, or that happens, right? Not everything works out perfectly, but just because not everything works out perfectly doesn't mean you blow up and disintegrate the standard, right? And this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing all the standards being disintegrated, right, in the name of making people feel comfortable or feel more accommodated, and so on and so forth. And in this avoidance of avoiding hurting anyone's feelings in any type of way, we've essentially in the West prioritize people's feelings over objective reality, even when that's extremely detrimental. You want to see another great example of this? Look at this whole fat acceptance, body positivity thing, right?
It literally is wild.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild, right? Obesity is being promoted, and this is the biggest killer of people. This is a problem that, again, it didn't really used to be a big problem. You could go back less than 100 years ago, and obesity was very rare. Obesity was very rare. And just in a century, in one person's lifetime, we've gotten to a stage where the majority of adults in this country are overweight or obese. The majority, right? Childhood obesity did not used to exist, right? You look at fat kids from like the 70s or the 80s, and it's like, oh, he's only like slightly chubby. Now it's like a fat kid weighs more than I do, right? And it's getting worse. And it got worse over the last couple of years, despite the fact that 80% of the people hospitalized with the Rona, overweight or obese. Can't talk about that. And it's like, dude, do you care? Do we care about like not offending anybody, or do we care about actually trying to help people?
I've always thought for a long time now, normalizing offending people and just like we are not going to be held captive by trying to tiptoe around offending people.
You can't do it.
It's just, listen, again, objectively,
Yes.
if you are unhealthy,
Yes.
it is bad for you. There will be people who hear you and I say that, and they will be like, these guys are assholes.
Yeah. Oh, but what about someone who had a car crash and has a thyroid issue, and so they got it's the exception thing. I'm just like, dude, I recognize most people who are obese are not obese because they have some hereditary thyroid issue, or because they got disabled in a car accident, and it's because they eat too much and they don't move enough.
Yeah. But I also think there's a exception issue. There's also what I'll call like a reverse extreme issue. So when you say people should be healthy, immediately Americans are idiots. So like you expect everyone to have a six pack, be able to squat 400 pounds, and they only can eat like a rabbit with lettuce. You are an asshole, right? And you're just like, no, dude, we're talking about like, can you go outside and walk down the street without losing your breath?
Yes.
Right? Like that's the baseline to start.
Yes.
And then it's even like you start thinking about, I do think a lot about like, if you just say healthy rather than like people should work out for whatever reason, like we're all stupid, idiot animals. And we're like, oh, healthy sounds good. Like that's a nice wrapper. Well, that's acceptable. Work out? You shouldn't be able to tell me to work out. Who are you to tell me that I need to be a certain size to fit in pants or this or like, no, dude, just be healthy. Like literally just whatever that means for you. By the way, some people feel healthy because they run on a treadmill or ride a stationary bike or do like cardio stuff. Other people feel healthy when they go and they lift weights. Some people, I don't know, there's a lot of fucking people in suburban America who, if you go around about, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock, what do you see?
Walking.
A bunch of people walking, and some of them even have some weights in their hand, right? Like that's how they feel healthy. Great. Who cares what they're doing? It's just like that direction is way better than us being like, you know what, 400 pounds, let's put the mannequin out there. And that's the new standard. Yeah, that's like a good thing. Look at us, we're promoting this.
That's the worst part of it. It's when they do the, healthy at any size. You can be obese and no, you cannot be obese and healthy, right? You cannot be healthy at any size. That is a lie. If you are 600 pounds, you are not healthy, period. All right, you cannot be healthy at any size. It's a complete lie. And something I've noticed about this is
doctors never say that, by the way.
And something that's interesting about this is, have you noticed it's only targeted at women? Only. There's no body positivity, fat acceptance movement for men.
So I may disagree on that.
Okay.
And the only disagreement I would say is the whole like dad bod.
It didn't work though.
But when I go to like a department store, which unfortunately you will not see me in very often, but I was recently in New York and they had a bunch of the women mannequins that, whatever. And I don't think I saw any of the men ones, but I've seen pictures on the internet of the like dad bod with like you know, the collared shirt or whatever.
Have you ever seen that on the cover of a men's magazine, a fitness magazine? No, right? But you'll see fat women on the cover. You know, it's so this is how you know this stuff is very engineered. It's very engineered. It's not organic, and people call it compassion. I don't think it's compassion. I think it's cruel. Straight up. I don't think it's compassionate at all. I think that, man.
Well, you're lying to people.
You're lying, yes.
This is the part that I think it's kind of like feedback in business. There's a lot of times business leaders, and this is pretty well documented, right? Business leaders will be super nice to folks, and the companies never work.
Okay.
Because what happens is like the truth is never said. Yes. So if you keep going to work every day and you're never told, hey, you're slacking on something, we need you to improve, you never improve, right? And if you never improve, the business doesn't improve, and then therefore it's much harder to be successful.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you have to go be an asshole. Exactly. And someone's got to yell and scream at you and call you an idiot and like do all this stuff.
How did you describe it before?
The reverse extreme.
Yeah, that's literally what it is. You say one thing, you know, I'm like, you know, I like apples, and it's like, oh, you hate bananas? I was like, dude, like,
banana hater.
you know, like, you forgot to mention, what about pineapples? What about? I was like, it's like, dude, like, you
canceled.
Yeah, that's the thing, you know, and it's just a problem because again, you can't fix things. There are certain things that are getting worse. The obesity problem is getting worse.
Did you see the Adele
getting worse
story?
Oh, and people hating on her for losing weight.
She lost weight, and all I saw 2 tweets about it. And I was like, I just got to keep scrolling because I'm fucking. But
don't you think it's interesting? I don't even want to make this like a gendered conversation, but don't you think it's interesting how that's like that's not a male thing at all?
Jonah Hill, remember the actor?
Yeah.
He lost a bunch of weight, and it was treated very differently.
Of course.
Right. And there's just 2 anecdotes. So like, whatever.
Yeah, but it's real. By the way, I've observed this my whole life, not just on social media, but there is a difference in this regard, right? I mean, even if, right, what's the criticism of Barbie dolls? Right? That unrealistic body standards and this and that, or, you know, there was that in the UK. There was this company called, I think they were called Protein World, and they had this ad which said, you know, are you beach body ready? And it had this fit woman in a bikini, and it became this like huge outrage thing, right? They went after them so hard and whatever. By the way, they had a male one as well, and no one cared about, you know, the are you beach body ready with the male body, but this one's misogynistic and this and unrealistic expectations. Like, bro, have you seen what action figures look like? Have you ever seen Superman or Batman or Wolverine or Cyclops with their freaking pecs and their 16 pack and they're like, we're just dude.
Can you imagine Superman with a dad bod?
No, but the point is, no one ever said, oh, this is setting an unrealistic and harmful expectation for young boys, and it's gonna. So there's something like really interesting going on there, right?
Is it like, because women have, through society's kind of reinforcement, more of a focus on
appearance,
their appearance? And I say this as somebody who I've got a 9-month-old daughter, and I think about even just if you walk into a toy store, right? If you walk into certain things, like you walk down the street, the way that people say things,
sure,
it's like, oh, she's so pretty,
yeah.
And like, I don't have the experience of having a son, so I don't know. Would people be like, oh, he's so handsome? Maybe. But like, for whatever reason, I'm like, no, she's fucking a genius.
Sure.
Right? Sure. Like, and so it's like a weird thing. Do you think that plays into it? Today's episode is brought to you by Alto IRA. Have you wanted to buy Bitcoin or over 200 other cryptocurrencies in your retirement account? Well, now you can with Alto IRA. They allow you to buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in a tax-advantaged way. There's no account or setup fees, and it's super simple to get started. You can go today to altoira.com/pomp to get started. altoira.com/pomp. Invest in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in your retirement account and get all the tax advantages while still holding digital currencies. altoira.com/pomp.
I think it absolutely plays into it. I think it's clear and obvious that across societies and cultures that women are valued more on appearance than men are. Women are judged. The way men and women are judged is different. And the way men judge women and the way women judge men is different, right? I was saying actually to someone the other day that you'll often hear feminists in particular, but other people often say, you know, that there's men who look at women like sex objects. There are men who do that, sure. There are also, one could argue that society and women view men as success objects, right? If a man, the way men and women view and sort of rate and rank each other is just different, right? It's just different. If you are a high-powered, successful man in your career and you're accomplished in this and that, that weighs differently to a woman with the same achievements, right? Guys will be like, yeah, but is she hot? You know?
That's why I'm surprised they never gone after the dating apps.
What's that?
I'm surprised that like the mob has never gone after the dating apps where literally judgments on humans are being made by the photo that you're shown and you're swiping left or right in like the most impersonal way possible. But the initial impression, which by the way, is exactly what happens in real life too, is based on looks.
It does.
And I've always been shocked that they're not like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. These conversations are interesting because the truth is biology always exists. You know, so we can talk about like this, and there's many things in the world where maybe we think it feels unfair or it feels like a double standard. Oh, how come it's like this? Or, it should be like that. It should be. And within reason, you can make certain accommodations, right? You can certainly treat people fairly, right? This is generally how I operate across the board. And what I strive to do is simply treat people fairly, treat everybody decently. Equal is a weird word because equal is equal. Human beings we're equal, but we're not, right? In a spiritual sense, like in a religious sense, in a worth of your life and how the laws should apply to you and so on. I believe human beings are equal. I believe human beings are created in the image of God, right? We're all equal. In the literal sense, we're not equal at all in any way. We're all we're very different. We're the most diverse species that's out there, right? We're not equally tall. We have different body weights. We look completely different. We have different eye colors. Some people are attractive. Some people are less attractive. Some people are highly athletic. Some people are very intelligent. Some people are dumb. Some people are, right? Like we're not equal at all in that sense. And also when it comes to, say, conversations about men and women are equal in a sense, right? In terms of your worth, in terms of your value and so on. But we're fundamentally, like as groups, we are different. And that's not a problem, right? There's people who problematize that, right? They almost want this like homogenous, genderless, weird society where it's weird because at the same time, these people will be like diversity, diversity, diversity. And then at the same time, they kind of want everyone to just be the same, just to be these like genderless blobs who there's no difference between the males and the females and maybe those categories don't even exist. And everyone's just, everyone even earns the same amount of money and everyone does the same. And it's like, dude, that sucks. Like and it's just not real. It's not realistic. It's silly to have a goal. Number one, that's not even a good goal, but it's unachievable. It's like, why would you want to achieve that? And you're also not going to. You see this in many things where people are even trying to force like certain things to be 50-50 in terms of gender, right? Oh, we want, it should be 50-50. Number one, it's funny because people only want that in certain jobs and sectors, right? I've never seen anyone advocating that 50% of construction workers or garbage disposal people or crab fishers or lumberjacks should be female. It's only like cushy executive jobs and whatever. But it's also like, why? Like, what problem are you trying to fix? Why is it an issue that most primary school teachers are female? That's not an issue to me. Men should be allowed to be primary school teachers, and they shouldn't be discriminated against. Like, if you're treating, again, it comes back to fairness. If you're treating people unfairly, that's a problem. If you're unfairly discriminating against people, that's a problem. Everyone should have the opportunity to do what they want. But understanding basic human nature and basic biology, you recognize that you're not going to get like this perfect magical split on everything because men and women, lo and behold, have different interests. You're in the Bitcoin and crypto space. It's probably what? 8 men to 1 woman? Not because women are not allowed in Bitcoin or crypto. Like it's literally like the most open thing available, but there's just it's more of a masculine tendency to be interested in that kind of stuff, right? I'm a rapper. What percentage of rappers are male? It's a very male dominated, women are allowed to rap. There's just more men who are into it. And you can find that on the inverse. There's plenty of things that are female dominated and so on. And it's just like, cool, that's fine. As long as people are not being unfairly discriminated against and there's equality of opportunity at the point of entry, then I don't have a problem with it. Let the chips fall where they do. And then people do it with like race and so on. And again, they're very selective with it, right? Imagine how crazy it would sound if someone came and said that like the NBA and the NFL are racist against non-black people, right? They'd be like, oh my gosh, black men are 7% of the population and they're over 70% of the NBA. This is clearly, where are the Jews? Where are the Asians? Where are the, it's like, Gilbo, just like, it's a meritocracy. Like everyone's allowed to play basketball.
Well, it's also,
this is how
the NBA, they discriminate against short people.
Yeah. How can we forget, right? Like how
that's unfair.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not 6'5". That's fucked up. I'd have been Michael Jordan. Y'all be talking about Anthony Pompliano if y'all let me in there, right? But like it's like, yeah, no shit.
It's really funny how people do it, because when you bring up those type of examples, people see how silly it is, but then they'll run off and they'll do that in a whole other sector, and I'm like, wait, why would you expect everything everywhere to perfectly represent the population demographics? That's just not how it works.
There's a weird thing of when people try to do the right thing. There's people who definitely are not good actors or not kind of well-intentioned, right? So put those people aside for a second. People who say like, let's use computer science as a sector. There's a lot of folks who say, hey, there's not as many women or minorities in that sector. Now, put aside for a second whether people want to debate that or not or whatever. Just hold that as a truth.
Yeah.
In most cases, what would make sense is, cool, let's go do things to incentivize more of those people to do it.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like an exposure thing. If you live in an area where no one's ever told you that's even a possibility, then like you don't know. How many kids end up going through a high school and their high school had some program, they get exposed to something, and that ends up being their career? And if they'd gone to the high school across town that didn't have that program, they would have never even been exposed to that thing and whatever. So like, okay, cool. Like you can do all these things that help build up one group or one effort without tearing down the others.
Yes.
And it works in reverse as well, right? Where people say like, the NBA, it'd be like saying, okay, we only can have 50% of a certain type of person, whether it's race, height, whatever. So, well, why don't you just try to go get more people to try out that, fit some other criteria? And I actually think that if just that was the focus, cool, you identified something that you want to change, like go work to change it in a positive way, but you're not allowed to tear down other things.
Yes.
Society would be like way chiller.
Yeah.
And people would be like, you know what? Like, I actually like that effort. I think that's great. It's when it becomes like a zero-sum game. That's where you get all the politicalization of it. That's where you get the debates. That's where you get all the fucking sensitivities. Like, and then it just spirals out of control.
Microaggressions.
Because now if it's zero sum, well, we're playing a zero sum game. We've both agreed we're playing a zero sum game. I'm not losing. Which means you have to lose. If it's positive sum, then it's much more working together.
Man, I have so many things I could say on this, dude.
We got a long time.
Good.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, this zero-sum mindset thing is a real plague. It's a big problem. People need to understand that life is not a zero-sum game. Money is not a zero-sum game. Health and fitness is not a zero-sum game. Relationships and dating or whatever, these things are not zero-sum. And one of the amazing things about the world, one of the coolest things with all the diversity we have in humanity is there are millions of games to play. And you only need to be really good at one to be successful, right? So, I mean, just look at jobs and career. Like, how many different ways are there to make money, right? So, you can't make it in the NBA. You're not 6'6" and amazing at basketball. Do you know what? There's another million things that you can create in this day and age. You could even create your own thing. Like, look at what we both do for a living. Like we probably struggle to explain this to like our great grandparents and be like, wait, you do what for a living? That's not a job. Like, what do you mean? Like, well, you have a podcast where you sit and you talk to people? Like, wait, you do it, none of it, no level of it makes any sense. And it's just like, that's awesome. So you don't need to, if you're not competitive in a particular field or you're just not interested in it, it's like, cool. Like you can just get in where you fit in, man. Like we all have a different pool of talents. We all have different experiences and interests and personalities. And that's dope because if we didn't, the world wouldn't even work because the way everything works with free trade is we all have different services and products that we can offer that other people find value, and we're all constantly exchanging. That's literally what the economy is. People have been brainwashed to think the economy is like some stock ticker or something. And this is the point I was making back in 2020 when they were locking down and shutting down. And I was like, yo, you're crushing the economy. People are like, you care more about the economy than human. I'm like, bro, human lives rely on the economy, and human lives we are the economy. Right? Like our ability to interact and trade and do all, like this is what gives everything value and also gives us meaning and purpose.
It's not the stock price when you say the economy.
No.
It's literally the corner store isn't fucking open and I need food. Yes. And if I can't get food, you got 72 hours or people are going to start doing fucked up shit.
Exactly.
Right? Like, yeah, and sure, they didn't shut down the grocery stores, but they shut down a hell of a lot of businesses.
Yeah, and that was the thing with it. So people need to get out of this zero-sum mindset thing. This is also where the whole like eat the rich thing comes from, right? People think that by their neighbor made money or that person has money, so therefore they must have stolen it from everyone else. The reason why there are poor people is because there are rich people. There's people who believe that. There's hundreds of millions of people who believe that poor people are just there because there are rich people. And it's the rich people being selfish and it's just them being greedy. And that's why, there's this limited pool of money and they're just hoarding it. So those people there can't get some. And I mean, people have believed this for centuries. It's what so much of like Marxist thought and it's all this zero-sum mentality thinking. So people need to get out of that mindset and everything, because it's, number one, it's literally not correct. And then number two is it just makes people very resentful and it creates more animosity and more division and so on. And it stops people from taking that personal responsibility and bettering themselves. Coming back to a different point that you were making before, I'm so glad you talked about this, encouraging people to know about and have access to certain opportunities, because I experienced this myself in a very interesting way when I was in university. So I studied computer science at Oxford. When I was at Oxford...
Canceled.
For going to Oxford, man? Are you from Cambridge or something?
You're educated? You have an unfair advantage.
Do you know what people at Oxford and Cambridge call the other university?
No, what?
The other place.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So people from Cambridge call Oxford the other place. People from Oxford call Cambridge the other place. There's a little rivalry there. But yeah, when I was in university, it was really interesting. So in my first year there, so in the whole university of, I think Oxford at the time, I want to say has around, 12 to 15,000 undergraduate students.
Okay.
Oxford got put in the spotlight because out of that, say 15,000 undergraduate students, do you know how many black people they had? Actually, I have a guess.
I'm going to underguess now, 250.
55.
Wow.
55 out of over 10,000.
Wow.
And so there were newspaper articles and stuff. Mm-hmm. Oxford is racist. Clearly. This institutional racism, systemic racism. And there was all this stuff, because that's how people look at things. They just see a disparity and their brain immediately jumps to some type of bigotry, discrimination, racism, sexism, whatever it is, right? They don't think. And my immediate thought was, oh, wow, that's low. How many applied? Mm-hmm. And then if you look at it, it was like, oh, okay, like not that many black people like even applied. And when I was there, I was part of something called the Oxford Access Scheme, which was to do exactly what you were saying. So bring in school students from certain backgrounds, more like, it wasn't like a racial thing per se, but more like certain inner cities and state schools and so on, places where so Oxford and Cambridge in the UK are obviously viewed as these very elite establishments. They're kind of viewed as things that there are many people in schools or certain sectors of life who don't even think that they or their children or whatever can ever go to Oxford or Cambridge. Mm-hmm. Like it's not even on their radar, right? Like if you go to like a private boarding school or, you're from Eton or Harrow, like there's a whole tradition of people going to Oxford and Cambridge, right? Mm-hmm. But from certain schools, it's like no one from that school has ever gone to Oxford or Cambridge. Like even the teachers it's not even on the radar. The students don't believe they can go.
Kid is guided in a different direction if that's even an aspiration.
Yeah. So this scheme was just to, show people and encourage academically gifted students, regardless of whether they're from a private school or a state school or whatever, to consider higher education, number one. And if they have the academic chops, potentially Oxford or Cambridge. And that, I think, is the right type of approach. So if someone does think, oh, okay, there's a real disparity here, like very, very clear, like maybe something's going on there, then that's the way to handle it. The way to handle it isn't to reduce the bar or to create a quota system where you start bean counting how many people we need this many people of this gender and this many people of these racial and ethnic groups and so on. Because once you do that, the only way you can achieve it through that method is active discrimination. Right. So if you're going to create a quota, like you said, like you joked about with the NBA, if you said there's a 50% hard cap on,
people over 6 foot,
right? then now you have to discriminate against people in order to so-called balance it out. And again, you're now creating the problem, right? Because if your claim is that the problem is unfair treatment and unfair discrimination, and your idea to remedy that is unfair treatment and unfair discrimination, then it's like, well, you've just created a problem.
This isn't hypothetical, though. This is here in the United States, Yale,
yes,
which is probably equivalent as these schools, was accused of, and I believe was actually found responsible. I don't want to say guilty because I don't know exactly how kind of it played out, but they had introduced certain quotas and criteria in the academic application process. And I think that they actually ended up having discriminated against Asian students.
Yep.
And so you look at it and you're like, oh, there's someone along the line was saying exactly what you're saying. And they were like, well, I'm not just going to go say it, and just move on to the next topic. I'm going to go bring it to the courts. And there was agreement. Like, yes, you cannot do this, or you should not do this, which then begs the question of like, well, what about all the other schools that are doing
exactly. Yeah, there was a big scandal with it with Harvard as well, discriminating potentially against Asian students. And that's it's so odd. And it's also bigoted in multiple directions. This is the thing, right? So I'll tell you one thing that I'll tell you something I would hate.
Okay.
And I never say this, but as a black man, I never start a sentence with that, right? But I would hate to think or feel that I am in my position or I achieved something simply because I'm like I was a diversity hire. Like that I got into Oxford because they just needed more black students. Not because I'm smart enough or I did well enough in my exams, but just because they lowered the bar for me. Because, I mean, that's the hard bigotry of low expectations. So the thing should never be, oh, let's reduce the standard. It's like, cool, like we can try to get more people from whatever community, whatever demographic over this bar or encourage people to apply or whatever it is. But I think at that point of application, whether it's a university position, it's a job, whatever, you've got to run with the meritocracy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're creating really bad conditions. And I think it's bad for everyone. I think it sucks an Asian student who has worked hard, who is an individual. Like, Asians are not a group. Like, these are individual human beings. A kid who's worked really hard in school and done well in his exams, and you're going to make it harder for him to go to a university because he's of Asian, because his parents are from Korea or from China or something. That is insane. That's racism. Like, that's crazy. Also, there's a kid who's his parents are Latino or black he might not be as smart as the Asian or the white kid. So let's lower the bar. Like, what? Are you insane? Like, it's so backwards to me. And that's why I think it's hilarious how it's called progressivism, because like so much stuff that they do is backwards. But yeah, no, I have a real problem with that. And I think it creates so much resentment. It's the same thing. I hate the concept of white privilege.
Explain.
Hate it.
Why?
Because it's racist. And it's bullcrap. It's not real, right? Like, it's bad for everybody. I don't see how. We were raised in like a normal time, right? Like it
honestly feels like that.
Yeah, like during the 90s, we were just taught. I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. But I was like, yo, I had extremely diverse classes. But I was like, just whatever. Like, people are people, treat people as individuals. None of my friends are I ever like focused on like what skin color people are. Oh, your parents are from this country or that or whatever. We were all just there. And it was all cool. Everything was fine. And I think that's how like most of us in our generation were raised. But people are going back to this sort of like racial essentialism, where you're no longer looking at people as individuals, but everyone is being made extraordinarily conscious of what group that they fit into. And then not just that, but you are then assigning whether virtues or sins to entire groups, right? So you're telling a young white kid that he is somehow privileged, or he's an oppressor, or he should have some type of guilt, some type of permanent guilt, something he's never done because centuries ago, someone who shared his melanin content did some, like, on multiple levels, it's just insane. And then you're telling the black kid now that, okay, well, society as a whole, all the institutions, the whole system, everything is set up against you, right? You're going to have to work 5 times as hard as your white friends in order. What? The police, also, like, you need to stay away from the police because they're all racist and they're probably going to, like, shoot you. What? Oh, and by the way, you should, like, feel some type of way about, you're just creating resentment on all these levels. Now those kids are going to school and they're looking at each other, not like, oh, this is my friend Johnny, this is my friend Billy. It's like, oh, well, I'm in this position. I have this color, he has that color. And so I should be treated this way, or I can't say this, or we should. I don't like any of it.
It's almost the, again, reverse extreme of
yes.
Skin color doesn't matter to now it's skin color is everything.
Skin color is everything.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of
it's a regression, right? Because that used to be the problem. Go back to 1850, right? In the 1850 USA, I was like, well, skin color is everything. Like, we should judge people based on this, black people are this and white people are this, and so therefore this and therefore that. And it was like, bro, okay, we all acknowledge that was a huge problem. And then it's like, okay, cool. We generally fixed it, got to a place where, 90% of plus people, and now you want to reintroduce it again in the name of, wokeness or progressivism. And you now want people again to start to view. I've heard, these so-called progressive people saying that, it's bad to be colorblind. Right? Oh, no, we must see race. We need to see it. We need to talk about it. We need to acknowledge it in every conversation, right? One of these wokies will come into this conversation and they'd insert it into this conversation. They'd be there like trying to analyze the power dynamic between us two and be like, oh, well, he's in this category and he's in this.
Well, this is the women's British deadlifting champion. I want to be careful.
And it's also all the assumptions that come with it as well, right? Like it's operating off such a low resolution worldview, right? Yeah. These people have this worldview that like every white person is like quaffing champagne on their yacht and has like generations and generations of inherited wealth and what, like they completely like ignore the vast majority of white people who kind of don't fit the bill. And they also have this idea of like, oh, like every black person or every minority person is like from, I've had arguments with people about whether or not I'm oppressed. I've had people trying to convince me I'm oppressed. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
That's so nice of them.
Right? I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, because they have all their like academic theories and whatever. And I'm like, bro, my dad is a doctor. Like, I've never wanted I'm like, I am privileged, right? I went to freaking Oxford. I went to boarding school. Like, I'm from a great family. My parents have been married for like 40 something years. I'm healthy. I was born in the UK, Like, I've got so many, like, they're like, oh, but, still, like, I'm somehow still a victim, apparently, of systemic. And I'm just like, bro, stop.
Did you see the viral tweet? The guy was joking,
okay.
But he was like, recently visited like a Portland coffee shop, and they're really taking this seriously. They have created an area, no whites allowed,
oh my gosh,
or whatever,
dude.
And he basically was like describing segregation,
yes.
but like doing it from the like
woke perspective.
Yeah, from the woke perspective.
Some universities have that now.
Oh, there are real places like
that. Yeah, there's universities that have that now, that have spaces for people of color. Or what do they have different terms for them? But yeah, they've brought back actual segregation.
Yeah, I saw a video also. I think it was like maybe a library or something. And of course, it's on a college campus. And there was a guy who's like sitting at his computer, and somebody was yelling at him, saying that they were feeling unsafe. They were feeling unsafe because he was in their presence. And like, again, you see these videos and you're just like, literally the guy 2 minutes ago could have been yelling and screaming and threatening people and like doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you just see like this calm scene. But if you just take it at face value and say like, okay, there's no outlier, there's no, exception to the rule. It's just like some guy sitting there with
I know the one you mean. He had the Blue Lives sticker on his Blue Lives Matter sticker on his laptop. It was the two white guys.
Yes.
And then there's the girls, and they're like,
and they're just going off on
this.
And I was just thinking of these situations, and I'm like, is this because humans are bored? And I'll give you context of this. So I've been reading a book, and it describes in one section 1870 to 1970. And it basically makes the argument like there was so much human progress that happened in that time period because of technology inventions of the automobile, electricity, all this stuff. The elevator created urban density. The automobile created horizontal speed, so we now can move things faster. We had the steam engine. We started going through all that, the Industrial Revolution. Like all these things were happening, and it was just an explosion. But in order to describe how great that time period was, they have to explain to you what life was in the 1870s and before. And basically the takeaway is like, that shit was hard.
Horrible, yeah.
And some of the key details are men worked till they died.
Yep.
There was no retirement, there's no social security, there's no anything. Like literally you worked because the day you stopped working, your family stopped eating. And so they worked in the fields, did all stuff. 75% of Americans in 1870 were in rural areas. Over 70% of all workers worked in what were categorized as unpleasant jobs. Women inside of the household had immense responsibilities and physical labor in terms of carrying flour and water and all these different things. They had to sew their own clothes. They had to do all this stuff. And the homes were all unconnected. They call it unnetworked, meaning that they had no gas, electricity, running water, like any of this stuff. That is a hard life that we are very fortunate today. We don't have to do that stuff. There's technology that does a bunch of this. Our homes are all connected. Like all these different things. The shift from unpleasant to pleasant jobs is like basically a 180.
So you're saying they weren't debating about pronouns and misgendering?
No, they were out in the fucking field with the mule trying to make sure that they had food for the winter. And so like you look at this and you're like, yo, we got it so good that people are bored. And like, you want to know how I know we're bored? Go check every person's cell phone and see the hours spent on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. And by the way, you can be learning about educational stuff or you can be doom scrolling.
Yes.
And we all do both. But like, if you spend an hour on your phone, basically just rotting your brain, you got an easy life.
Yes.
Because anyone who has a hard life doesn't have that luxury. And so it's like, is this the end result of basically just being so free, so good in life that we debate this shit?
Yeah, we're living through an overcorrection of multiple sorts. Do you know why I talk about this stuff?
Why?
It's because of it's literally because of what you just said. Because I recognize how good we have it and how freaking long it's taken for things to get here. And I'm like, guys, don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. The conversation we were just having about, racial harmony. Dude, look around the world, look through history. People were freaking racist, man. Like it was horrible. People used to enslave each other, segregate, brutalize each other, call each other like just nasty stuff. People used to get lynched, bro. Like it was the KKK at its peak had over 4 million members. The KKK had members like people in Congress. They had governors. They had like in the KKK, like imagine the governor of a state being in the KKK. Like that used to be okay. Like not even 100 years ago. And
that is fucking wild.
That's wild.
I'm sorry, like that is just such a fucking insane statistic.
That's what I mean. So when I hear people say like, oh, racism is just as bad as it's always been. In fact, it's getting worse. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, we can recognize things not being perfect and we can strive for better, right? We all have ways we want society to improve. But if you are going to discount the progress that's been made over the past century, 2 centuries, then it's going to lead you to this area where you lack perspective and you lack gratitude. And when you lack perspective and you lack gratitude, as you problematize things, you create problems where they don't exist. And if you're not careful, you can make things worse, right? So human nature, I don't believe, has fundamentally changed over those centuries, right? What has changed? The 2 advantages that we have as people who are alive in 2022, the key 2 big advantages we have over our grandparents and great-grandparents is, number 1, we have better stuff. We have more technology, we have the internet, we have the opportunity and the tools to just do cool stuff, right? We have new tools, and we have knowledge of the history. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel all the time, we can look back and go, how do we know segregation's a bad idea? How do we know that racial segregation's a bad idea, right? Oh, because we can look at apartheid. You can look at Jim Crow. You can look at how this has happened in different places. You can see what it led to. You can see, man, that was like a moral deficiency. It led to this problem. It led to that problem. Like, it was, and it was just wrong, right? You can look back. How do we know that slavery is wrong? Oh, because it was tried for thousands of years across different countries. And yeah, like you don't even need to debate it. It's just like, okay, that was clearly wrong. And those are the only 2 advantages we have. Fundamentally, we have the same hardware, right? Our brains operate in the same way. Like, we have the same bodies and the same organs. And so let's not be stupid with that technology and with that knowledge. Let's use it. Let's be like, oh, okay, like, here are some things that we should repeat. These are great things we've inherited from our ancestors, and this has worked really well for society, and we should maybe keep those institutions going. I mean, a great example of this to me is like marriage and marriage in the family. It's like, okay, well, every country, every culture, all across society for these hundreds, thousands of years, they've all had this institution and brought children into the world primarily under this institution, and it's worked well for and places who tried something totally different, they're not round anymore, or they're very small or whatever, or it led to chaos. So that's probably a good idea. I mean, that's something we should keep. It doesn't mean everyone has to get married or whatever. It doesn't need to be enforced, but generally speaking, cool. Like, that's a good institution. And then the stuff that's bad, okay, cool. Like, we can jettison that. Let's keep that. Let's get rid of that. And this to me is just where the proper balance between what you could call conservatism, liberalism, and progressivism is, right? It's you conserve the things that are working well and lead to a positive functioning society and happiness. You have liberalism, which in its proper sense prioritizes the rights and freedoms of the individual. You can make your choices regardless of, who you are and these categories you fit into, whatever. You have the free choice to live your life as you see fit. You have the right to speak. You have the right to practice or not practice a religion. You have the right to freedom of association, so on, right? You have your basic fundamental rights. And then what progressivism should mean is, okay, look, there are still some things that we need to improve. There are changes that we can make. Let's balance these things out and let's do this carefully, right? Let's do this carefully. If you're driving a car and it's like, if someone gets in a car and is asking me, is it better to accelerate or brake? I'm like, well, is it best to turn left or right? Well,
yes.
Right? You see what I mean, right? So this is the thing, right? So when people go to these kind of like radical ends of say what people call progressivism, it's just change at all costs. Just change everything. Just flip the whole thing on. It's no, get rid of that. It's like, bro, but that thing works. Like, why'd you want to get rid of this stuff? It's like, no, just go. Just slam your foot on the accelerator, and it's like, dude, you're gonna crash.
There's a wall.
Yeah. Similarly, if you just like hold down the brake. Right, just hold the brake. No, we can't change anything. Like, no, we must conserve and preserve complete status quo. It's like, all right, well, you don't move anywhere. You don't go forward. So this is actually why, I think some people won't like me saying this, but this is the value of having dialogue between people of different socio-political perspectives and so on, right? Because there is value and intelligence in each one, and they all check each other, right? So the natural conservative tendency is hit the brake, right? The progressive tendency is hit the accelerator. So it's like, actually, if you have a sensible dialogue and you bring people together, then we can have an honest and mature conversation, yeah, people are going to disagree. It might get, heated at times and so on. You're never going to have like this perfect harmony because people are different. But I think you can have a good balance where society is slowly improving. I think that's generally what we have had. I think it's still what we do have. I think we're just in a very messy phase of it. And with the introduction of smartphones and social media, it's made it faster. And it's made it more chaotic because you now have access to billions of people's thoughts and opinions and ideas, whereas before that was all just in people's heads and you couldn't see it, and then you've got the bot interference and so on.
Dude, the bot problem.
The bot problem it's nuts, especially on your account.
I am going to nominate my account for the single worst Twitter account in terms of the bot problem.
It's crazy.
I've thought, I haven't done it yet. I did it one time, like kind of half-heartedly, but like I've thought every time that I tweet, I should just tag the CEO of Twitter so that his notifications get as many of the bots as mine, and the problem be fixed tomorrow. Like it's literally hundreds, right? I went and I looked the other day, and I had blocked manually over 1,000 accounts, and then I went, and then they've been wiping them, right? So they're doing something. It's just they're not stopping the ones from actually getting posted. And then I blocked a bunch more, and I was back up over 1,000, and I was like, I've probably spent hours of my life fighting hand-to-hand combat on the internet with some fucking bot farm outside the United States somewhere. And there's somebody who's just running a script and they're like, here you go, motherfucker. Yeah. Right? Like, how quick can you report and block these people?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm going to try because the product's unusable without it.
It's annoying. It's also annoying because it's so easy to fix. That's not a hard problem to fix.
Anyone who has CZ Binance in their fucking name and isn't the verified account, block them. Like, okay, I just solved 80% of the bot problem, and literally I thought for 10 seconds about it, right? Like, it's so simple.
Yeah, I remember when Elon brought up the idea of verification and people freaked out because they were like, oh, you're going to have to submit like your social security number. And I was like, dude, I don't think that's what he means. I think you're going a little. I understand.
You don't need a social security number to prove you're not a bot.
Yeah. I don't think he wants like full on, KYC. I think it's just a basic verification of humanity, which in itself could cut down that nonsense probably by 80-90%.
Well, it's going to become discriminatory because they're going to come up with a verification for like celebrities and then like the common person. And
doesn't that already exist?
Well, if now there's different colored check marks.
Oh.
Right? Like, but this is the game. It's like, well, why do they get the blue one? Fucking blue people, right? Blue people. And you're like, wait, well, what is going on right now?
Haven't they done an experiment with that where they've just like given people like different colored stickers and sort of put them in a room? Yeah, and they band together and start mistreating people who have the
Did you see the wolves in, I think it's Yosemite National Park?
No.
So I don't know exactly how they captured it, but there's an image that I saw going around, and they were able to track different packs of wolves in this national park. And, if you imagine tracking a pack of wolves, it's like a bunch of lines everywhere, right? Because they're moving around and must have been for months, if not years. Each pack has its own color.
Okay.
When you zoom out and look at the map, it's like the blue lines are all right here. The pink ones are here. The red ones are here. The green ones are here. The yellow ones are here. And basically the takeaway was like the wolves don't fuck with each other. They stay with their pack. And literally there was no blue going into the red area. Like it's almost like gangs, right? Like just like they knew what the rules of the road were and they stayed in their pack. And my takeaway from it was like, you mean to tell me that it's literally like a genetic, like natural thing that people tend to stay in packs? The wolves do it, humans do it, all stuff. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you can't go to another pack, doesn't mean that you can't have social mobility, all these different things. But like, there's like a biology conversation somewhere in there that if the wolves do it and humans do it, maybe it's not humans maliciously doing stuff. And again, there's exceptions, fine. But that was more eye-opening to me than anything else that I've seen in this conversation around like, yo, You tell me the wolves do the shit that humans are being accused of? Maybe it's not a human thing.
Oh, dude, no, it's not at all, man. Tribalism is a biological thing. And tribalism just exists. It's not good nor bad. It's just, it just exists,
there's
right?
positive and negative impact from it, but it's just a thing that exists.
Yeah, it's a thing that exists. And again, if we communicate intelligently, and again, I do think that to give props to most Western countries, certainly the USA, certainly the UK, have made fantastic headway in this direction, in moving away from overly toxic tribalism. I mean, you need tribalism because we're all members of families and communities, and then on top of that, we have nationalities. People are from certain. So, that's fine. Even what people support, right? People have their sports teams that they support or whatever, and you can have some fun tribalism there. But as soon as you start like, oh, you beat somebody up because they wore the wrong football jersey, or you get like to levels of hooliganism, or you get to, as we've discussed, racism, or let alone going to genocides or something. Like, okay, like the tribalism has gone way, way, way too far. So I think the key thing is, just recognizing that exists, and then what's the best thing you can do? I often think of just going up a level. Right. So if you think of how tribalism works, we're all members of multiple different tribes. But if you actually go up a level, you gain more commonality. Right. So if someone is like people are getting stuck in this tribalism and division over here, it's like, wait, why don't you all go up one level and you'll see what you have in common? Right. And this is something that's particularly crazy when you look at certain things that have happened in history, or even certain conflicts that are still going on, which are weird. I mean, okay, take the religious line. I mean, look at Northern Ireland, right? Where's that whole conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics? And I'm like, bro, you're all Christian. And you're all Irish. You're all Irish Christians. Why are you bombing each other, right? Or who?
Because they're wrong.
They're wrong. They have a slightly different interpretation of the Bible. Or who's most Islamic terrorism aimed at? It's aimed at other Muslims, right? And I'm like, man, that's so wild. That shows how toxically tribal people can get. Man, you look at, obviously people always use the example of like the Holocaust, but something much more recently, I mean, 94, the Rwandan genocide. I don't know how much, listeners have looked into that, but that's such a horrible story. But it's like, man, it shows you the power of unhinged tribalism, and when the media and politicians get involved in it and start stoking tensions, like these are all Rwandans, right? You've got Tutsis, you've got Hutu, and you had about 1 million people killed, slaughtered, not by a government machine, by their own neighbors, primarily with machetes. This is just 1994, right? And people kind of like gloss over this. I think oftentimes things that happen in Africa are glossed over in the West. They only kind of talk about Africa when it's convenient. But when you look at these stories, this is why looking at history is important. Like, I'm not a historian, but I like to look at stories of history because it teaches you really about the human condition. And because we haven't fundamentally changed in our hardware and in our biology, it's really important to recognize that, because, and this is why I think it makes people uncomfortable, because if you do it honestly, you realize that you have to face your own shadow. You have to face the darkness, right? Everyone wants to imagine, oh, if I was in Nazi Germany, I would have freed the Jews.
Bullshit.
I would have done
the majority.
Yep.
There would be people who would do it.
No, the majority would have either been Nazis or have been sympathetic to them or have just kept their heads down. That's the truth. And no one wants to even like,
how do we know that? Well, because that's what majority of people did do. They fell into one of those three groups.
Yes, that's just what happens. And so one reason why I'm even how I am is because I've really thought about a lot of this stuff. I've really thought about it. I've looked at I've read the Gulag Archipelago. I've read Ordinary Men. I've read certain things and looked at even certain studies, the Milgram experiment, Ash experiment, and saying, okay, the dynamics when people are in groups or in tribes, like this can lead to this really loopy and even very dark and violent stuff. So even when I was in my 20s, I was thinking, okay, if I were ever in this kind of situation, what are my boundaries and principles, and how should I behave? Because there's this groupthink thing that happens, and there's when fear takes over. And I'm just like, okay, I need to think about this. And I've spent a lot of time kind of doing that mental work of like, okay, hopefully in my lifetime, nothing that bad is ever going to happen or be coming down the pipeline. But if it does, these are the things to be aware of. And you understand how the fear takes over and how the social pressure takes over and how, the authorities, even just the way people defer to authority, which can, again, it's not always something that's inherently bad, right? We all need to be able to be leaders sometimes and followers sometimes, right? And if we're being honest, even people who are leaders, you probably spend more time following than leading for the most part. So it's not that deference to authority is a bad thing, but the authority has to be good, has to be valid, has to be legitimate. And you can't just, what's that? Well, those magic words, I was just following orders, right? That doesn't cut it, right? There comes a time where you have to be like, no, I'm not gonna do this thing that completely goes against my morals or my ethics or my values just because I was told to. And that line is different for different people, but I do recommend people think about it and have one.
So there's people who get put in the position, right? And they can choose whether to follow either side of that line. But there's been a larger resurgence. I don't know if you could say it's large, but it's growing, of people who are starting to speak out about all kinds of stuff. Obviously, the pandemic was kind of a wake-up call for lots and lots of people. And they were like, wait, hold on a second, this is kind of crazy stuff. One of the people, Andrew Tate, took the world by storm. And then essentially got kicked off all the social media platforms.
Yep.
What do you think about the state of deplatforming and censorship and like how bad is it right now?
Yeah, free Top G, man. Before I answer that question, it's actually been really fascinating to see that because I had him on my podcast in February 2019. And then I visited him and his brother in Romania in 2020, and I was hanging out with him in Dubai actually earlier this year. So it's interesting when somebody who you know becomes this sort of like global conversation, and you're seeing like 90% of what I read about him online is wrong, which is interesting because I'm like, I know this guy. Like people are just saying crazy stuff. So, but yeah, in terms of deplatforming, it sucks, man. Honestly, it sucks. It's extraordinarily illiberal. It's actually, dude, I mean, again, I don't think people think about this stuff deeply enough. They deplatformed the former president of the United States of America from multiple platforms simultaneously. I don't care whether you like Trump, dislike Trump, what. That is insane. That should freak you out. Like that should He
technically was still president when they did it.
He was still the sitting president of the United States. Someone's in bed, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, like in a coordinated, off of a very fuzzy notion that he didn't call for violence. He didn't actually, people are, oh, well, he broke. It's like, you can't even, like people just repeat stuff. People just parrot stuff. But here's another issue that happens.
The sitting part, by the way, is like when people are like, "Oh, it happened." I think some people are like, "Oh,"
and it still happened. Crazy. He's still not allowed back on.
But the sitting president of the United States of America, dude. And again, if they were to go and do it to Joe Biden, I would still be just as much as like, yo, hold on, because it becomes a thing where who's in charge,
dude? It's crazy.
Like, wait, what?
Yeah. Dude, anyone who celebrated that, you're a dummy. If you celebrated Trump being deplatformed, you are a fool.
Because it goes back to the idea of never use a tool that you wish for your enemy to never have access to. Yep. Right? And so like if Twitter got sold and they went and they hired somebody and they wanted to go after all the Democrats, I think there'd be a lot of people like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not a political left or right thing to me. No. It's just again, there are exceptions of if you call for violence, if you do certain things, okay, got it. But it feels like there's this world of just like, you got too much power as a user. And I think that, if you look at Tate, it's not very clear to me as to like why he got taken off all these different platforms.
Do you know? I spoke to him the day that it happened because I called him immediately and I was like, dude, like what the heck just happened? This is when his YouTube had it was just his Instagram and Facebook.
Okay.
But his YouTube hadn't been taken down and so on. And then, that came a couple days later. Do you know?
Coincidence.
Yeah. But this is, it's important for people to understand this because he did not violate. He didn't post anything that violated their policies. Do you know the policy they banned him under?
No.
Was the dangerous individuals or organizations. So they just
that motherfucker was spitting too much truth.
So if you think, why does this policy exist? This policy exists so that the Ku Klux Klan can't have an official Instagram page. This exists so that Al Qaeda cannot be putting out recruitment videos on YouTube, et cetera. That's why, dangerous persons and organizations. So they've essentially thrown him in that same category with the worst, like actual terrorists, actual murderers, actual genocidal maniacs, because and this is how they weaponize these words. The words they weaponize, I'll tell you, some of the most dangerous words being used these days are dangerous, safety, harm, and harmful. That's how they always phrase it, right? It's always, we need to protect you. We need to protect you, right? Oh, this is harmful. This is misinformation. This is harmful. You made that person feel unsafe. You probably saw the other day about, from the podcast thing. Did you see the one with Ben Shapiro?
No.
You didn't see the podcast thing in Dallas?
No.
Where someone's laughing. Yo. Oh my gosh.
Oh, he went to the conference. This is a conference where he showed up to a conference and then they said people felt unsafe because he was I did see this.
We apologize for the harm his presence caused. His presence.
That's a powerful motherfucker. It sounds like
5'8" Jewish man in a kippah, or standing there after his organization spent $30,000 to rent a booth and sponsor the event. Dude, like the whole thing is wild. But this is the weaponization of language, right? During the pandemic, why were they kicking people out? He's harmful, spreading harmful disinformation, misinformation. There's people who literally put out facts, right? They deplatform doctors, they deplatform scientists, just harmful misinformation. And so that sort of safety language, it's how they deplatform Trump. It's how they deplatform Tate. Prior to this, by the way, because I've been on Twitter since 2009. So I remember when this all started. Because for the first, up until about 2014, 2015, no one worried about getting deplatformed.
That's when they got, what was the?
Alex Jones,
but then there was another.
Gavin McInnes.
Another conservative
Laura
guy.
Loomer,
the guy with the.
Milo Yiannopoulos.
Milo, that's what I'm thinking.
There were like a bunch of them. And it was all people on the right.
Yep.
And they always start with the people who are more objectionable. Mm-hmm. Right? So again, people now, there's these dummies celebrating Andrew Tate's ban. It's like, you considered him a couple of years ago, they considered Alex Jones on the fringe. Mm-hmm. And they considered Milo Yiannopoulos and Gavin, they were on the fringe. All right, now you consider Andrew Tate. Do you dummies not realize that as that closes in, you at some point are going to be standing on the edge of that island as it's crumbling all around you?
You know that the YouTube video we put up of Andrew Tate, the title was Andrew Tate is the new Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Because it was so obvious.
Brilliant interview, by the way.
That was going to be the game.
Yeah.
It's just like, you're saying things that are outside. And I joke about like, that somebody's saying too much truth, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's talking Shapiro, Tate, whatever. But you know what the most telling part of the entire Andrew Tate situation to me was?
Tell me.
This episode is brought to you by 8 Sleep. Good sleep is a game changer, and the 8 Sleep Pod is the best sleep machine. I sleep on it every single night. A great night of sleep allows you to be healthier, be more rested, and have more energy throughout the day. And on the brand new 8 Sleep Pod 3, you can sleep as cold as 55 degrees Fahrenheit or as hot as 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the secret of thermoregulation. Better sleep, better energy. Get yourself an 8 Sleep. You can go to 8sleep.com/pomp today to go ahead and get $150 off your order. 8sleep.com/pomp. Not only do I sleep on it every night, it literally changed my life, and I begged the founders to let me invest in the company. 8sleep.com/pomp. Go get yourself an 8 Sleep pod and get a better night of sleep. He came out with the last message, an hour and 10-minute video. It came out, and I said, you know what? I owe this guy my time. He did a bunch of stuff. He said all this stuff and everything. People have been asking me, hey, you met him? What is he like? All this stuff and everything, right? And I said, the fact that somebody would ask me that tells me that you're a critical thinker, right? Because you're like, hey, I see all this stuff on the internet, but like, what's he really like? Let me talk to somebody who at least talk to him because I can't talk to him or whatever. It's like, okay, cool. But then I'd be at dinner and other people would be chirping and, saying all this crazy shit and everything. And I just sit there and I was like,
it's a human trafficker.
Well, it's just like, you just have no clue, right? You have no clue because you have an opinion about somebody that you've never spoken to before. Yes. So when that came out, I took it and I'm on a bunch of these group chats and stuff with people who, generally have big audiences or influential, whatever. And I put it in there. And I said, listen, whether you like this person or not, whatever your preconceived notion is, watch this. Yeah. See what you think. If you want to watch it because you think that this is the 21st century way of communication, and this is like, you're studying the tactics, not the content, cool. You'll get some value out of it. But if you actually want to know more about the person, watch this. And I'd love to hear what you guys all think. I can't tell you how many people responded to this, said, I don't have time to watch it. Yeah, of course. It's an hour. Oh, I don't have that time. And they just didn't even look at it. Yeah. But then I saw them, they were still sharing opinions about it and everything. And I said, look, I don't expect people to defend somebody they don't know. I don't also expect people to, going back to kind of the beginning of our conversation, have some crazy opinion either way or whatever. But if you do have an opinion, you owe yourself.
Be informed.
Go get the information.
And another thing is, people need to stop this thing of conflating defending. I like to say, I will defend Andrew Tate himself, but not that he needs me to. He can defend himself. But you can defend principles. There are principles. Like if you are someone with principles and values and belief, if you believe in the concept of freedom of speech, right? Not just on a legal level, not just on this narrow legal level, but it's actually a cultural issue too. Freedom of speech is not supposed to just be a legal concept. It's also a social and cultural concept, right? You could, if you have freedom of speech so-called protected under the law, but like societally and culturally, it's absolutely not tolerated, then you don't really have it. If people are terrified to speak and say basic things, then you're not supporting freedom of speech. So anyone who, my personal feelings about the person or what they're saying, whether I agree with them politically or I don't care. I will defend the principle of someone having a right to voice what they want to voice for a huge number of reasons. Another thing that's also been getting lost in our society, and maybe, I don't know. I don't know if this is linked to the loss of religion, because it can, religion can also overly be used to kind of push the opposite. But forgiveness and salvation, right? This is one of the, I don't think, like, yes, sure, social media, private company, you can do whatever you want. Like, bro, I'm largely libertarian. Like, I'm not even arguing that. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. This cuts in all directions. And also, you need to give people a pathway to, people change. You need to give people a pathway to forgiveness and salvation and understanding and so on. If you just, even the proper legal system understands this, right? There are people who have killed people who are walking free. There's people who have raped, robbed, burgled people who are walking free. They served their time. They spent 25 years in prison. They did their whole sentence. Fingers crossed, they actually reformed and they changed. And now they're an integrated, productive member of society. You don't condemn the person forever. Oh, you stole something when you were 17. We're going to lock you up forever in jail and we're going to throw away the key. Oh,
But if you tweet bad things, you don't get to come back.
Permanent bans shouldn't exist. I know that social media is not everything, but bro, like majority of the world is on social media. Billions of people use it. It's where the conversations happen. So the idea that you said something in 2014, which Twitter felt cross line, and so never again can you use that. That is insane to me, bro. That's crazy. Even if you did actually cross the line, how about, okay, 1 year ban, 1 year ban. After that, you learn your lesson, you can come back and play nice. But the idea that you just kick people off forever, especially to do it so arbitrarily, to me I think it sends a really bad message. And I think also, and this has been studied, I know that the guys at minds.com studied this.
They're great.
It radicalizes people more.
Of course.
It radicalizes people more. How do you get someone to change their mind? You have to talk to them. Like, I understand, trust me, I understand that having conversations with certain people is not fun and it's not right. Like, there's people out there who are just so far gone. I'm like, dude, I don't want to sit down and really have a conversation with like an actual white supremacist or something, right? But that's the only way to get them to change their views. You have to hear them out. You have to rebut them. You have to talk. I believe that good ideas ultimately win. If you don't censor, I do believe that good ideas generally will float to the top. Not all the time, not 100%, but you let people voice their stuff. You let them have their concerns. You can correct them on this. You can debate this. And so just censoring that person and pushing them out to the corner, and then who do they go hang with and who are they conversing with, right? They're just with the other banned people. Right. That's one of the problems you've had with some of the alternative social media platforms, especially something like Gab. Right. Because it's like become the home of everyone who got kicked off of everything else now goes to this one platform. And it's like it's not moderated at all. It's just like, OK, well, you can kind of just say whatever on there and people are going to like back you up and reinforce that. And so you believe it's even more and more true. And it increases the polarization. It's not helping. I think there's this natural tendency as human beings when we see or we hear something we don't like I understand censorship because it's not hard to understand. If someone says something that offends you or you don't like or you have a visceral reaction to, the natural inclination is to want to shut that person up. Right? You that's the first urge. That's like the biological urge is shut this person up, get them out of my sight. I don't even want to talk to them. In fact, they shouldn't even be allowed to say what they're saying. I get where that tendency comes from, but we have to be able to fight it because ultimately in this country, you've got about 340 million people. In this world, we've got about 8 billion people. No two people are the same. There's no two people on this planet who agree on absolutely everything. It doesn't exist. We're all different. We have our different social views, cultural views, personalities, religious views, political. Like we're different, right?
That's a good thing.
Yes, and it's a good thing, and it's fine, and we need to be able to coexist, right? So if I look at a country like the USA, and I talk about the US a lot, I'm here right now, but also the USA truly is a leader. I don't know if Americans always understand just how much. When people call the USA the leader of the free world, that's not just a cute name. That's actually what it is, right? Other countries across Europe, Australia, Canada, the UK, they take cues from the USA. Even non-Western countries take cues from the USA. So what happens in the USA does matter, right? Whether it's the music that becomes popular here becomes popular in other countries. The ideas that become popular here often become popular in other places. And so that's why, because some Americans don't get, mind your own business. Why are you talking about the US? And it's like, dude, because it impacts everyone. It impacts everyone. And you've got such a big population. And oh man, sorry, I'm losing what was the initial point I was going to make? Well, yes, people need to be able to coexist. Yeah. Right? If you're going to have all that diversity in every true sense of the word, then you need a way of having things. You need you need a legal structure, obviously.
But also culture changes and things that were not previously acceptable become acceptable.
Yes.
And in reverse.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people who the mob came for because of things they said in 2000. And I always remind folks, you want to know the single best way that I found, especially men, but to figure out how much culture has changed? Go on YouTube and search The Man Show, Jimmy Kimmel, and Adam Carolla. They had a show on Comedy Central. This show, literally called The Man Show, it was for men.
Yeah.
It had women in like bikinis jumping on trampolines. They were drinking beer and doing dude shit.
Yeah.
Right? I told somebody that this show existed. They're like, that shit never was on television. I said, it was on a fucking regular cable. Like, it wasn't a pay-per-view. It wasn't, it was like, literally, if you just like had the cable at the house, you could get the show. And they were like, no way. So we went. The very first episode from this show is on YouTube. You will watch 5 minutes of this and be like, how did they ever air it? You're literally like, there's no, like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
But it's because it was a different time.
Yeah.
And so obviously what was okay then is now viewed as not okay. Okay. But the reverse happens. There's things that you couldn't say 3 years ago that now you can say. And so if somebody was punished or kicked off or whatever, how do you accommodate or account for, well, what if things change and now what they're saying is like an accepted thing. And Zero Hedge was probably the example where we saw this the most. They were the first to talk about the lab leak, kicked off immediately. The second they got kicked off, I was like, oh, somebody's going to have to find out some more information on this. Now we have politicians. I would argue that actually there's
the most common theory now.
A number of politicians who think it's the most likely thing.
It's the most likely theory.
And so, again, they got reinstated and all this stuff. But like, imagine if they'd been kicked off of any platform and not allowed back. It was a permanent ban. And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, we're like, oh yeah, everyone thinks this.
Yeah.
How do you bring them back?
Yeah, I agree, man. That's the salvation component. I think a big part of it also is just maturity. I think a lot about like how mature we are as a society. And I think that we've been, some of this stems from the comfort you alluded to earlier, but we've had a lot of infantilization of adults over the past few decades to a level that is where people cannot handle and regulate their own emotions. I call it emotional incontinence. And we essentially are catering to the most neurotic, most scaredy cat, most easily offended, most easily triggered people. It's like a race to the bottom. And instead of trying to encourage people to become more resilient and strong mentally, physically, and emotionally, we're trying to nerf the whole world, right? So instead of telling the person who wants to cry because someone called them not their preferred pronoun, instead of telling that person, like, look, man, be strong. It's not the end of the world, right? People talk, like, people generally refer to people based on the biological gender that they think they are. And so, like, bro, like, get over it. Just get over it. Instead, it's like, oh no, we need to get 99.9% of people who never had any issue ever with how pronouns are used. Now we need to change the entire English language and your understanding of it to cater to this not even 0.1% of people, right? Like this, one guy on Twitter got offended, so we all need to cater to. By the way, we had the same thing during the pandemic, right? Instead of just going, okay, look, there's a certain segment of the population that's particularly vulnerable to this disease, and there should be certain accommodations and perhaps policies and things put in place for them. Instead, it's like, no, we need to treat everyone the same, right? Because there's this, 1% of people, 100% of you need to completely sideline your entire lives for 2 years because of this thing. By the way,
can you imagine how offended people would have been if they said old people and unhealthy people, and you were anything below the age of 60 and you were unhealthy?
Do you know who wouldn't have been offended? Old people.
Of course.
Isn't that funny?
Of course.
The people who are most vulnerable. I remember early on when I was in the UK.
Old people are like, yo, it was save me.
I remember whenever I was like going around maskless like the rebel I am, like the other people I see not wearing masks were almost always over 60.
Of course.
It was hilarious. Like I'd be in the supermarket, everyone in like from teenagers to 40s, they're all wearing their mask, and then I'm just seeing like some old guy or some old woman just going around with that, and I'm like, they don't care. Like that like no one even like, was there ever a poll done on elderly people asking if they even, all this was done supposedly in their name. It's like, do they even want that? Is that even like, why can't they take care of themselves? But again, it's this infantilization, and because that's how you treat children. You don't let children make all their own choices. You don't even tell you don't even get to choose what you eat for breakfast. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll have 2 cereals and you can pick one, right? But that's how they're treating adults now, right? There's this loss of idea of adults are mature and therefore you can give them a level of autonomy and liberty and freedom and ability to make their own choices and so on. It's like, no, we need to take that away and be more authoritarian because we can't trust the people to make their own decisions. And I think that people need to stop playing into that. And I think that when you encourage this censorship or safe spaces or deplatforming everyone you disagree with or whatever, and you're discouraging conversation and debate and discourse, then it it furthers the problem. And you're appeasing the weakest links.
Of course.
You're appeasing the weakest links. And we've never done that before. We've gone from survival of the fittest to tyranny of the weakest.
Speaking of survival of the fittest, what's up with the Secretary of State in the UK, or Secretary of Health?
The new one?
The new one.
She doesn't look healthy.
Yeah. And then I saw a lineup of a bunch of Secretary of Healths across all these countries, and a lot of them don't look very healthy. Now, I don't think that Arnold Schwarzenegger is the expectation, right, of like somebody who's like a bodybuilder or like super, super fit because they do nothing but work out all day. But there is some irony to the fact that a number of people who supposedly are in charge of the health of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people may not actually be healthy themselves.
No, we don't live in serious countries, bro.
Like, it is kind of like a Simpsons episode, right? Like, yo, if we gonna have a Secretary of Health, let's make them really not healthy. That'd be funny.
It's weird, man. It's weird. It's strange because it's across the world. I mean, do you remember the old one from Belgium?
Yes.
Like, and this isn't me trying to be mean to people, but if you are, here's a controversial opinion. I think that if you are a personal trainer or a health secretary or a I think you should be in shape. Like, I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask for. I feel the same when I see like an obese personal trainer and I'm like, like practice what you preach. Like if I'm going to hire a financial advisor and they are like broken massively in debt.
See, when you say it this way, people are like, oh, this is ridiculous. Warren Buffett, who's like somehow has escaped all of the mob, whatever. Yeah. One of his like famous quotes is Wall Street is the only place where millionaires ride in nice cars to go get advice from people who rode the subway. Right? Like basically the rich people are getting advice from people who may not be rich. And again, I don't think that, take money as an example, to be a financial advisor, you have to be rich and
like ultra rich.
Like, like richer than your clients. Yeah. But like, it goes back to like, maybe you just need to have good financial habits.
Yeah.
And guess what? If you have good financial habits, you will eventually build some level of wealth.
Yes, you shouldn't be ultra broken in debt.
Same thing with fitness. You don't have to be the bodybuilder, right? You don't have to be an ultra marathon runner. But like, be generally eating healthy, be generally taking care of yourself in whatever way. Like if a health minister or whatever you want to call them, right, was like, you know what, I go for a 30-minute walk every day, I eat healthy and generally feel good and all that, like, great. Like that's what works for that person. They seem to care.
It is.
They're like putting things into practice. And by the way, that's going to be the message.
It's also just modeling. Yeah. You know, it's role modeling, man. I mean, bro, I've written 2 fitness books. If like just that alone means I can't be out of shape. Like even from my own perspective, if I'm ever like, I'm like, bro, I literally wrote fitness book. Like I tell people about fitness, I cannot let myself go back, right? Like that's embarrassing, dude. It's like, bro, like you're not even like, why don't you read your own book and take your own, right? You know what I mean? It's just like, it's such a basic thing. But
people on the internet also live, you grow accustomed to the trolls. Yeah. So like before you tweet something, you like pretty much know like, oh, here's what the trolls will say, or like, hey, let me say it in a way that takes away their like argument or whatever. I think that those same people in the real world, like, you know, right? You're like, if I get out of shape, some troll will be like, dude, read your own book, right? Like, and so like, there's this like conditioning that happens where you're constantly always just like, all right, what are the trolls?
I have that troll in my own head. Yeah. Like that's why
you're good at what you do, though. Yeah, it's because you're like, yo, I fucking know what you trolls. I got your argument already.
I'll hold myself accountable before anybody else does. But man, politics is so weird though in that regard because I don't know. Like I flip-flop between thinking the whole thing is just kind of a game or an illusion or like it's real. I don't know, but I feel like every American I know, all of my American acquaintances or friends, I believe would be a better president than the current one. All of them. I think you'd be a better president than Joe Biden. I think everyone, your staff, I think. So I'm always like, how, even when you look at like the mayor level or the, you know, I think, you know, Florida, well, we're in Florida, Miami and Florida both have, you know, good mayors and governors, I believe. But like around the country, I just see some of the mayors and some of the, they're so goofy. I'm just like, how is this person, like, how did this person become the leader? Because like, I'll go to the city or whatever, and I'm like, bro, like you, like any of you could do this better.
Have you seen, there's one race specifically, I think it's in Pennsylvania. I want to say it's in Congress, maybe. They got two guys, and I pay so little attention to this that I'm definitely afraid of getting something wrong. But I think it's this guy, John Fetterman and Dr. Oz.
Yes.
And the only reason why I know those two guys are running against each other is because somebody took a video of Dr. Oz like yelling and screaming whatever about the other guy, and then the John Fetterman guy yelling and screaming about him, and they put it like back to back, and they were like, dude, what the fuck is going on here? And it's just like, man, those are the two choices that some group of people have.
It's weird.
And like, I don't know what their policies are. I don't know like anything, right? But it wasn't exactly like a video that made me be like, you know what? I need to wake up and be better.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this whole like role model thing is, I think, again, people will debate, presidents, if you start at the top, used to be aspirational in the sense of people wanted that job.
Yes.
People felt like you had to be a good citizen, moral, like all these things to get that job.
Mm-hmm.
And the president made the nation want to be better.
Yes.
And the way that the nation wants to be better is the individual feels like that. Like, well, that sounds a lot like fucking leadership, but put that aside. I feel like there are very few people in the world today that are in traditional positions of power or influence that have that impact.
I agree.
Now it's people on the internet with like a fucking cell phone who like are doing selfie videos.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, like that's a pretty interesting dynamic where we shifted from like all this centralized control and power and influence, all this stuff. And like that's what the aspirational role model, type relationship was. Now people are running to like this other thing.
Yeah.
And they're still getting it. Like, I don't know, Jocko Willink versus like the president of the United States. Like, well, he's probably more actionable for the everyday person in terms of like, wake up, take responsibility, do whatever. I don't think very many presidents were like, make your bed. Right? But like, that's still a pretty big shift to me.
Yeah.
And it feels like we just like, oh yeah, these people are important now. And we just don't even worry at all about the fact that the people in power aren't.
Yeah. And that extends to traditional celebrities as well. And I think long term, this is actually good.
Okay.
I think for some people, regardless of what people say, most people are not huge fans of change. Regardless of what they think, like most people don't actually love having drastic changes. And we're living through a totally unique period in human history right now. And I think this is part of why it's why we're having this conversation. It's why stuff feels so chaotic and confusing and deranging and destructive, because there's this weird reordering that is going on. There are institutions and positions and things that have existed forever, and they're losing the power and centralization that they had. You see this in the media. You've just talked about it in politics, even in celebrity culture or who's deemed an influencer, right? Before, you had to go through the proper channels. There were always gatekeepers. Whether you're a musician, you're an actor, you're a comedian, you're this, you had to go through very certain things, right? To be a celebrity even 40 years ago, there were not like independent musician celebrities, or of course there were no YouTubers or podcasters. It was like, okay, you've got news anchors. And you've got, the people in the political levels, and you've got the Hollywood celebrities, and you've got this and that. And if you talk to the younger generation, already the shift has happened because they know YouTubers and TikTokers and Instagrammers and actually recognize them more than they recognize what we consider traditional celebrities.
100%.
Right? And also they aspire more to that. There aren't that many young people you'll talk to and be like, oh, I want to be an actor, or they're like, oh, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be, I want to be an influencer. Now, some people might not like that because they might think it's weird and those aren't real jobs or whatever. But my point is that there's this creative destruction which is happening. I actually think a lot of it started. I think the music industry was one of the first things that got massively disrupted by the internet and by social media and so on.
50 Cent broke the music business.
50 Cent.
Everyone forgets that. 50 Cent broke the mixtape strategy, and he also had a website, and he was leaking his own music on his own website. He was reading the comments, and then he was basically going back and saying, okay, let's not release that one. It's not, the audience doesn't like it. Let's do something else or whatever. But like that eventually became what music did, and he was one of the first people to realize it.
Yep.
And it's all because Columbia Records dropped him the night that he got shot.
Yep. And so this is happening. We see it happen with digital photography, with the film industry. Now you've got dude, Blockbuster could have bought Netflix when it was cheap, right? I mean, Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore. So just in our own, I mean, if you just look in our own relatively short lifetimes, the shifts we've had are insane, absolutely insane. And so, I mean, if you even in just in the last 10 years, so while I have many concerns and we all have concerns and we're worried about this and that, even with stuff like the deplatforming, right? I think a solution will be worked out long term. Like right now it sucks. Right now it's like, dude, like what's going on? Why are they doing this? Why don't they know how to moderate properly? I think part of why they don't, sure, they have their political biases, right? And there can be some malice involved. But also it's like, this is new. This is a new problem. I don't think that when Jack Dorsey made Twitter or when Mark Zuckerberg made it, I don't think they had a clue they were going to be as big as they are. No. There is no way on earth Mark Zuckerberg thought, 3 billion people are going to be, there's over 3 billion.
No, dude, he was like hot or not.
half the world's population uses your product. That's insane. And they're talking like, sure, there's moderation issues. We cannot, but that's not easy. That's not an easy task to just be like, okay, like this is exactly the way you do it. You're going to have new things popping up. MySpace was the big thing when I was starting out in music. Like new things are going to come in. This is going to come in. That's going to become bigger. That's going to become smaller. And I think one thing that's great is that we are having this actual increased democratization. Did I say the word right? Where anybody, anybody out there, you can build your own platform. You can become a well-known person or celebrity in your own right. We're getting all these, instead of just having a handful of Hollywood celebrities or a handful of actors or athletes or whatever, it's like, yeah, you still got that. But now you've just got, there's like millions of micro influencers and micro celebrities, and people are finding that. I think overall that's really good. It's creating new jobs, new creative outlets, new ways of doing things. I'll tell you something that I think is going to be massively disrupted by this, and I don't think that the legacy version is prepared. And I can't wait for this to happen, actually. This is an area where I'm a progressive. Education. Education and higher education. We're still running off the fumes of this centuries-old academic model, both in schools and at universities. And as we're seeing, as the cost of university continues to increase, while the value of a degree continues to decrease, that's not sustainable. You can't keep having the value of a degree staying the same or decreasing as the financial cost goes up and up and up and up every year, as well as you're having this whole digital revolution going on. It's going to move. It has to change. It has to shift, just like the music industry was forced through this change, just like the film industry was forced through this change, just like other things are happening, right? We're Bitcoin guys, right? The financial industry is being disrupted and is going through this change. It's going to happen with education, and that will be 100% agree. And that will be good. The one thing that the legacy still has is what I would call, it's funny me saying this as an Oxford graduate, perceived legitimacy, right? So the average person, and lots of this is an overhang from older generations, so many people still have this mentality of, you have to go to college. Even employers have this. So many people will say, well, you have to go to college because employers say you need a degree to get. It's like, that's going to change. It's already changing with certain companies. Most companies driven by younger people don't care about your degree. They care about what you can do and your personality and so on. So that whole, I think in the next decade or two, the whole education system, especially in higher education, is going to be much more fragmented and decentralized. The thing that needs to be worked out online, I believe, and this will take time, is the accreditation. The accreditation, and then with that, the perceived legitimacy that comes with it. So as someone who went to Oxford University, even though like a day-to-day thing, I don't use my degree for anything that I do. But just the fact, if I ever wanted to go back into the traditional world of work, which I don't, the fact I have an Oxford University degree on a global level, that is recognized as, oh wow, this guy is smart. There's the prestige with it, and that's cool. That's cool. But I will say this myself. The thing really should be like, well, what are your capabilities? Mm-hmm. What can you done? What have you done? Right? It's not having an Oxford degree that makes me smart or makes me capable or makes me competent or anything. It's who I am and the way my brain works and the way that I operate. So yeah, it's cool to have that box ticked. But I think as time goes on with it, I think it'll take a couple generations for this shift to happen and for there maybe to be online equivalents in terms of perceived legitimacy as the Oxfords and the Harvards and the Cambridges and the Yales and so on. That'll take some time because these institutions are old. I mean, Oxford is about, I want to say about 600 years older than the USA. My college was founded in the 1100s. Yeah, right?
That is crazy.
It was founded in the 1100s, right? And so, you've got people from, C.S. Lewis to J.R. Tolkien to all these prime ministers and so on who went through those halls. So I don't think that's going to completely go away. Mm-hmm. But I think that when it comes to university STEM is going to be there and it's going to stay and certain universities are going to stay. But there's so much that's ripe for not just disruption, but I'd say destruction. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of nonsense out there that is, just nonsense degrees. Yeah. Nonsense degrees at nonsense universities that are not helping anyone. They're kind of glorified Ponzi schemes as far as I'm aware, because the only thing you can only way you can make money with them is to either get a fake job or become someone who then goes back into academia and teaches everyone about, lesbian dance theory. They're not real degrees. They don't help anyone. They don't do anything of value to society. So I think those are gonna naturally go. You let the free market happen. Yeah. And
who the most dangerous person in America is?
Ooh.
It's along these lines of disruption. So it's not education, but it's media.
Okay.
Joe Rogan.
Rogan, yeah.
The reason being not for what most people think of the audience size. Yes, that is important, but because he's willing to have the conversations that nowhere else basically will with that size of audience. But do you want to know what my prediction is for somebody who will become one of the most dangerous people in America? Andrew Schulz.
Interesting.
Because, one, he's got the protection of being a comedian. He's allowed to say things in society that many other people cannot say. Mm-hmm. Second is his weapon of choice is his mind. Mm. He's willing to go direct to the people. Mm-hmm. And it's the number one thing that scares the shit out of the centralized institutions. Yeah. So if you're sitting there and, for those that don't know, he sold one special, sold a second one. They wanted to edit out some jokes. He said, no, I'll buy it back from you. And I'll just go direct and I'll set up a website, theandrewschulz.com, and I'll sell directly to the people. And he claims that he made more than 5 times more money than if he'd done it with a streamer.
I believe that.
If you're sitting there and you're a streamer, you have to be absolutely shaking in fear that he just basically red-pilled a bunch of these comedians that say, why would I come to you? Why don't I just go direct? Yeah. And then I have the contact information of the audience. I can remarket to them. I can do all these things. I can sell them tickets. I can do like I just cut you out of the process. And now me and my people, we communicate directly. Yeah. That's like the new danger in society is these people who are willing to think differently and can disrupt these institutions, these mechanisms, because it's not about the first person who does it. Because technically even Schulz wasn't the first one to do it, right? There are other people who have done it before. But the people who popularize the strategy, everyone who follows. And so when you think of things like, YouTube or whatever, it's like there was one person who was the first actor who was like, well, I'm not going to act in a movie. I'm going to act on the internet. Then another, then another, then another. And then Mr. Beast comes along. Yep. And now people are like, yo, Mr. Beast is bigger than the movie studios. And there's a bunch of young kids who are like, I want to be the next Mr. Beast in my own, whatever. And so it's like, to the movie industry, the biggest threat is actually Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
He got more views than Squid Games got on Netflix.
Good.
And so you're sitting there saying like, oh shit.
Yep.
That one video is not the threat. It's that he just red-pilled an entire generation of kids. You don't have to go do the movie theater.
Yeah, I love it. Do you know who worked this out early?
Who?
Rappers. Independent rappers.
Explain.
Like independent rappers back in the 90s who would just hustle their music independently, right? Whether you're talking about Too Short or Ludacris before the record deal, or, you know, later 50 Cent with the mixtape hustle. A lot of the guys in the South, a lot of the guys from like Houston, some of the Bay Area rappers, there was just this thing, you know, even how Jay-Z even started, right? Like print up your own record, market it, and sell it yourself. And I mean, that's where I took my inspiration from. I mean, I don't know how much you know about my story of how I like built up my music audience in the UK.
London, right?
Yeah, on the streets. Well, the whole UK.
The whole UK.
So when I was at Oxford, I started rapping when I was in my first year of university. I released my first album when I was 19. In my second year, it was an album called Commercial Underground. And the first ever run I did a run of 50 CDs to begin with. And I just sold those to friends and family. Boom, in a week, they were all sold. I went back, took that money, cool, printed 250. Similar, word was getting around, primarily sold it around people in my university. And then boom, I took that money and printed 1,000. And at this point, I'd exhausted my...
People you knew.
Yeah, people I knew. And I'd bought CDs off people in the street before. Like if I'm walking around in London or central London, you know, I'd meet guys and London rappers and I'd buy CDs off of them. I knew about the mixtape hustle that was going on in the USA and so on. And I bought mixtapes in the USA when I traveled here. I was like, that's what I'll do. So I remember the first day ever, I went out on the street. I think I just had like 6 CDs with me or something. And I was like, okay, let me just try this out. And I think it took like half an hour before I even approached anybody, because I'm like there. I was like, whoa, like people see me now and they're like, oh wow, Zuby's so extroverted and confident. But it's like, man, like that's because I've had hundreds and thousands of conversations. But you know, I remember I think the third person I spoke to bought my album for like £5, and I was like, oh wow, was that set up for life? I was like, wow, I sold one, that means I can sell another. You know, within a couple hours, within like 2 hours, you know, I sold all the CDs. I came back the next day. You know, I brought 10 CDs with me. Boom, I sold 10 CDs. I made £50. I was like, okay, this is what I can do. And then over time, I started doing that all over the country, right? I would travel all the way to Scotland. I'd go to Wales. I went to the Isle of Wight. I'm going to East Anglia, all over the UK, every city. And I was just selling my CDs. I sold over 30,000 albums hand to hand.
Jesus.
Out of my backpack. Just me, hand to hand. Do you know how many people you have to talk to sell 30,000 CDs? Like, dude, that's what
people
I did.
People aren't buying 10,000 at a time.
No. So that was I learned to speak French. I learned to speak Spanish because in the UK you get people from all over Europe. So I was like, man, I keep bumping into French people, and I'm sure I taught myself French. I was like, I'd have days where I'm just speaking French all day, selling my CDs to all these French kids in Oxford or in Canterbury or whatever. And then in 2014, with my friend Shaudo, who's also an independent rapper, we started what was called the Blue and Purple store. So it was a pop-up shop. So you know, in shopping malls, sometimes if you're walking through, they've got the little kiosks and stores and independent retailers selling their stuff. So we started doing that. We opened the first one at the Whiteley Shopping Center in London, and we were selling our CDs and also our T-shirts and hats. We didn't have that much merch at the time. And that went well. And then we opened one in like West Key and Southampton. We started doing pop-up shops. So rather than just being on the street all the time, we moved indoors. Crappy British weather too, so we were protected from the elements. In fact, when it started raining, it was good because everyone would come into the mall. Yeah. So we'd be there. We started selling our hoodies, our T-shirts. I used to have my own brand of headphones, and that became the bread and butter for me from 2014 to 2018, or even early 2019. The majority of my income was coming through doing those pop-up shops.
Interesting.
So one thing that what's weird with my career trajectory is over probably 99% of people who know me discovered me since 2019. But I released my first album in 2006. So I've been going for a long, long time. So it's funny now, people see me doing certain things or whatever, like, oh, this guy, you know, came out of nowhere or over. And I'm like, dude, like I've been grinding
compounding.
For half my life. Like I've been, you know, I put out my first album 19. Oh, bro, like I'm 36 now. I'm just like, dude, like it doesn't even seem that long, but I've just been out there grinding. And with that has come, thankfully, one thing people often say, I'm like, man, Zuby, like you've got away with words. You're so good at talking to people and stuff. I'm like, bro, I've spoken to more people than anybody. Or when people are like, oh, how do you deal with people saying mean things on the internet? How do you deal with it? I'm like, dude, I used to sell my CDs on the street.
You ever heard of somebody say something mean to you in person?
For a decade. I would just be out there in different cities. Like literally, I just get in my van. I just go travel to Manchester stay in a crappy hotel for a week and just go. And every day I'm just out there, whatever the weather, talking to people, getting ignored, getting love, getting people hating on me, getting this, getting that. Just so I've already experienced like in person every type of, whether it from love and praise to complete misunderstanding to being ignored, it's also why I have so much like time and love and support and gratitude for where things are now. Because yeah, I'm still on my pathway, but it always blows my mind if I go to an event, especially if I'm in the States, because I'm not even from here. Right? My mind is blown if I'm walking around Miami and someone's like, oh, hey, Zuby, like over here. I'm like, dude, that's crazy. Like I'm an independent rapper from England. Right?
I'm from another country.
I'm from a whole other country, and I don't have any machine behind me.
Yeah,
I don't have a team. I don't have an agent. I don't have a manager. I never had loads of money put into me or whatever. And I'm like, oh wow, like I'm in the White House. Oh, I'm talking. Joe Rogan wants to talk to me. Oh, I'm hanging with Tucker Carlson. Oh, I'm here with Pomp. Like I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm being asked to speak at. In October, I'm going to Australia. I've been invited to speak at some big events in Australia. I'm like, whoa. And I'm going there and people are like, yeah, I can't wait for you to come. And I'm like, yo, that's wild.
That's on the other side of the world.
Yeah. I'm like, that's nuts. Like, yeah, I mean, you take off on Monday, land on Wednesday. That's how far away it is. And I'm just like, man, so I just feel such an extreme gratitude for every person. I mean, I did an event. I did a bunch of events last month. I spoke at the Young Americans for Liberty National Student Conference, the Young Americas Foundation National Conservatives Student Conference, Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, and so on. And in all these events, Lord knows how many selfies I took and, just talking to everyone who wanted. And even sometimes with the organizers, because they always want to, as a speaker, they always want to make sure that you're like, okay, and people aren't bothering you. And I'm like, it's fine. They're like, yo, like, you don't have to take all these. And I'm like, I will take every photo everyone wants. Like, I've worked my butt off for this to have. Like, the fact that these people even know who I am, let alone love what I'm doing and have taken some inspiration. If it means I'm standing here cheesing for 2 hours, as long as I don't have like something else to rush off to, I will do it. I do meetups in different cities. Like I'll just hang with people. And I would like to do that as long as it is physically possible to do, no matter how big or famous or whatever I become in the future. To me, it's always, from the beginning, it's always been about people. It's always been about wanting to help, motivate, inspire people in different ways. I don't view myself as like, this is another thing that with that change in how celebrity works now, right? Because before it was kind of like you're cultivated to be a celebrity and then you're put in this place where that's why so many of them are so out of touch, right? So they've kind of been on this weird pedestal.
There's movie stars who could tweet and be like, I'm going to be at the, whatever location, and no one shows up. And if you tweet and you're like, I'll be here, 1,000 people show up. It's like, who's famous, right?
But they wouldn't even do that because
it's beneath them.
So many of them, they're viewed in this different echelon, almost like you're not really a human. And I think what's really cool about the kind of thing that we do and how we've grown organically with our social media and everything is, number one, you've been on that whole journey. So you keep a level of, we're both confident people, but you're humble. You're humble. I'm not like here, like, oh, I'm this super celebrity guy and y'all are below me or something. It's like, no, like I'm me because of you. You guys support me. And so that's why I'm even able to do this stuff. And it's just, I think it's way more relatable. It's way more real. It allows you to be authentic. And it also means that the people who know you, generally, of course, we have our haters or whatever, but the people who know you, they don't just know you because you're on TV all the time or, oh, you're just that famous actor or whatever. They know you because they like what you do.
Of course.
And that's awesome.
But it also is real impact. I think a lot about like, in the world, there's a lot of people who say, I do X. Mm-hmm. And you're like, cool, what is the impact of it? And sometimes they just don't know, right? Because they don't get it. But then there's a lot of people who are like, we reach X number of people. And you're like, cool, but are they like paying attention, mm-hmm. right? And Mr. Beast manager Reed, he did a interview with Colin and Samir. I don't know if you've seen these guys. They do interviews with people in like the YouTube ecosystem. Okay. And I was listening to it. Somebody sent it to me, and he said something that was just fascinating. He goes, if you watch 3 videos of somebody on TikTok, you probably don't even know who they are, mm-hmm. what their name is, whatever. Mm-hmm. If you watch 3 YouTube videos of somebody, you definitely know what their name is.
100%.
Right? And it's just a difference of the audience relationship with the personal stuff. But then you move into longer stuff. If somebody is still listening to this right now, they've been listening for 2 hours and 20 minutes or whatever, right? Like, damn, they definitely know what your name is, right? And then you move it into the physical world. And then you get even to like Schulz in his special. He's got a joke. He's like, man, I'm judging all presidents now on whether they can move merch or not. Right? If you can move merch, yeah, people like you, right? So like you kind of like, there's all these like stages to it. But what you realize is it comes back to like, why do anybody care? Mm. It's because there's some impact that happened, right? There's some like real connection to it. And so I even think for myself, like there's certain people who, if they came to Miami, I'd be like, fuck. Other people show up and I'd be like, you know what? I would pay money to go there, sit and for 2 hours, right? Consume everything that they're saying, all this stuff, because I find it fascinating or it has some impact or whatever. That's true of every single person in the world. Mm. The difference, though, is the authenticity. And this gets to the whole like movie star versus people on the internet. Nobody thinks that the movie star is authentic, except for you see some of the movie stars now using social media to become authentic. Mm-hmm. Like that's pretty much it, right?
And this is also how you can now, what's also funny with it is you can also tell who's an asshole now.
Well, 100%.
Right? I'm sure there are celebrities out there who maybe you had a certain view on, and then actually you see how they are on social media, how they talk to other people and how mm-hmm. they treat people. I'm like, man, this guy's not cool.
Yeah, fucking loser.
You know, right? and I think that's dope. Some people might think, some people don't like the sort of loss of the mystique, or they don't like the fact that, they learn that their favorite author or actor is actually not very nice. But to me, it's cool. I think that the truth is, whether or not you like the truth is good to have out there. And I see you eyeing up that book.
This book is the last thing I want to talk about. Yeah. The Candy Calamity, which is a children's book that you wrote mm-hmm. and you published with Brave Books. And it's got amazing graphics, all this stuff in it. Why did you write a children's book? Because it fits into a lot of what we talked about today.
It does. So I have a simple heuristic to decide whether or not I want to do something. And it's because I'm very clear on my mission, and I have been for over 15 years. And my mission in life is to positively impact, inspire, and motivate as many people as possible through my words and my talents. Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to do that primarily just through music. And as time has evolved, lots of additional things have been added to that. So if I think something is going to move the needle on that, I typically say yes to it. If I don't, I typically say no. So Brave Books reached out to me last year, and they were like, man, we've been following you for a while. All of our staff love what you do, and we're always sharing your tweets and sharing clips of your videos and stuff. So we'd love to do a children's book with you. And I'd heard of them already because I know a couple people who'd done books with them. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Clearly passes that test. I mean, children are not a demographic that I've primarily targeted. Mm-hmm. Teenagers with my music, lots of teenagers have bought my music and stuff, but that sort of younger age group. And I was like, oh, cool. And then they were like, have a think about what sort of topics. They typically do more books that are more socio-political mm-hmm. in terms of the overall message. It's not on the nose because it's still children's books. But I was like, you know what? I want to do one that's totally apolitical, mm-hmm. Has no slant to it in any way, and just has a positive and inspiring message. 2019, I'd written my book for adults called Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody. That's, sold over 10,000 copies independently. It's helped a lot of people to lose weight and get in shape. And I was like, man, there aren't that many children's books talking about health and fitness, and why is it important? Parents will tell their kids, eat healthy, go out and exercise. They won't normally tell them why. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, let me have a story which is fun and it's an adventure and it's beautifully illustrated, and I made it all rhyme. But it's about the importance of health, nutrition, exercise, and self-control. So in the story of in the book, it's about not going, avoiding the extremes. Right? Not to be a complete lazy slob and to sit there and eat candy all day, but also don't exercise and forget to eat. Don't exercise to the point that you're forgetting to eat and you're exhausting yourself and you're passing out, that there's a healthy balance. So that's the message I wanted to convey in the book. And it was also just fun. I also say yes to things that excite me. As soon as I heard it, I was like, yo, actually, a children's book wasn't on my radar, but it is right now. And that would be cool. And that'll be fun. And that'll help more people. And it's done so, and it's doing that.
What has been the response from parents and stuff?
Yeah, so really, really positive. I've had some really nice videos and photos, which are always fun to get. Like just people send you a DM, and it's like their child holding the book, or like them reading. I'm like, man, that's so beautiful. So I'm not a parent yet. I do have 9 nieces and nephews. So that's
basically the honorary.
Yeah. So when I was actually writing it, I was running it by them. They range between like 3 and 16. Oh. So I was when it was still just digital before it got printed, I was showing them, have a look at it, and even just putting on an iPad and seeing how captivated they are, and see can you read along with the rhymes and so on. So I kind of was able to field test it a little bit on them.
Testing going on there.
little sort of test
This
group.
book was A/B tested by a group of 9 kids. Where can people go to get the book?
You can get the book at candycalamity.com.
Okay.
Brave Books, which is at bravebooks.com. They also do a subscription. So they release a new book every month. So if someone wants to get their monthly book, you can get the subscription.
It's all targeted for kids.
Yeah, they're all children's books. But yeah, candycalamity.com.
You
can grab it right there.
I just love also, by the way, I don't know if people are going to be able to see if they're watching on the video, but the look of the candy right on the front, I'm like, I've been in that mood before.
Yeah, and if you're a Zuby fan, it's got a couple little references in there that people might understand, like okay, dude.
Okay, dude. Dude, you have been able to capitalize on a number of different ridiculous events, from the deadlifting to the okay dude. The okay dude one was probably did you ever get any blowback for the shirts and all that? No. People just laughed.
Nah. I made 5 figures from it, but
yeah. Okay, dude.
Yeah, from the merch. but yeah, no blow. I mean, I'll be honest, man. People always ask me about blowback and hate and criticism and nasty stuff. And yeah, there's some of it. But honestly, it's like maybe 2%. And it's only online.
Yeah,
it's only online. In the real world, everything is cool. Everything's blessed. People are ultra nice.
I've had people come up to me in the stream, like, yo, Pomp, what's up?
Yeah.
Hey, nice to meet you, whatever. DM me on Twitter so that I have your information or whatever. And I will go look. And in the fucking DM, we'll be like, Pomp, you're an idiot. Like,
oh, really?
I'm like, and it's like 2 years before. But I'm like, don't DM me if that's what you DM me before. Like, what? And I just been like, are you good? And they're like, yeah, sorry, man. I just had a bad day that day, whatever. Like, and I'm like, cool.
Dude, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
I tell people this, especially people who want to grow on social media. Right now, there are millions of people scrolling through their Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram feeds looking for something to get upset about.
Yes.
They're having a bad day. They're already angry. And you might just be the person that day who comes across their feed, who's saying something they don't like. And don't take it personally, right? Sometimes people are just in a nasty mood and you're the person who's in their crosshairs that day and they lash out at you. Also, some people just have weird ways of trying to get attention. So they might think by calling you an idiot, that's the best way to get your attention. In some ways, it kind of is, because we react more to negative than we do to positive. You'll certainly get noticed, but I'm probably not going to do you any favors after you've called me an idiot. So it's not the approach I recommend. But And some of it's probably just bots.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
I'll try to do better next time.
I try to do that.
Right? And they're like, like it's kind of hard, right? Or like, I remember one time somebody, I think it was an email. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he emailed me and he was like, you're the biggest fucking moron, blah, blah, whatever. And I just remember responding and just being like, well, if I was the smartest guy in the room, I'd be in the wrong room. Mm-hmm. Right? And then they're kind of like, yeah,
it disarms people, doesn't
like,
it?
But yeah, just like, how do you react to somebody who's
sometimes I've had people like apologize. Like sometimes someone comes at me like super harsh. And then I won't respond in kind, and I'll be kind of like, well, like hope you still have a good day or whatever. And they're like, and then they'll message a couple. Sorry, man, I was kind of an asshole.
Just have a good day. Yeah. Like, hey, man, that's cool, no problem. Just don't be an asshole on the internet.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
All right, where can we send people to find you on Twitter too? Just at Zuby
Music? At Zuby Music. Yeah, on all social media at Zuby Music.
And what's the website?
TeamZuby.com.
TeamZuby.com.
And by the time this podcast comes out, the new version should have been launched. I'm doing a whole new merch relaunch. I've shifted my whole merchandise operation to the USA. Got brand new stuff. Yeah, so it's gonna the merch is gonna be taken over in the next year.
All right, so TeamZuby.com, CandyCalamity.com.
That's right.
And then Zuby Music on all social media.
That's it.
You were welcome here whenever you want, my friend. I enjoyed talking to you every single time, so thanks so much.
Appreciate it, bro. God bless.